Auntie, only you can cure my disease. Zhongliang was injured in an accident, which caused his brain to secrete excessive dopamine every day. He became thinner and more haggard, and his wife could not bear it. Life could not go on. Until one day, he met a female doctor named Shen Caiyue. The first time he saw this woman, Zhongliang felt that his soul was purified and he found the long-lost peace. He knew he was saved. Chapter 1, Go Find Another Woman. Today marks the second anniversary of Zhongliang's marriage to his wife. After finishing work, the couple returned home, and Zhongliang couldn't wait to embrace his wife and rush into the bedroom. They celebrated enthusiastically. After dinner, his wife finished her shower and lay on the bed. Zhongliang looked at his wife in a pink spaghetti strap nightgown, her delicate features and curvaceous, well-proportioned body. He couldn't help but start touching her again. Go find another woman, his wife said impatiently, pushing his hand away from her body. She wasn't really blaming him, but in the past year, she had truly become exhausted. Zhongliang sensed his wife's impatience. He knew he had a problem controlling his desires, and his excessive demands had left them both physically and mentally drained. He sighed deeply and muttered, "I'll sleep in another room. We can't sleep well together on the same bed." He reluctantly got out of bed and left. His wife watched his lonely figure retreat, and her heart ached. But she was really tired, and the frequent sexual activity had even caused some gynecological problems. She was truly willing but powerless. After Zhongliang returned to another room, he could only relieve himself. He didn't want to do it, but he couldn't control it. When he wasn't satisfied, he couldn't sleep at all. Being excited all night without sleep made the next day even worse. During the day, he was somewhat distracted by work, but once the evening came and things slowed down, his mind was consumed by impulses he couldn't control. 2 years ago, Zhongliang was 24 and worked as an air conditioner installer. He was 1.8 meters tall, weighed 80 kilograms, and had a fit physique with a fair and handsome face. His hometown was in a rural area, not wealthy but without burdens, so it was manageable. He was noticed by his current mother-in-law and family because he installed air conditioners for them. As the saying goes, when a woman chases a man, there's a veil between them. His mother-in-law's family was wealthy, and they had 2 apartments in the same neighborhood. He didn't have to worry about buying a house, which made things much easier. He had a good impression of his wife too: small nose, small mouth, big eyes. She wasn't tall but was attractive, with a fair and curvy body. Although she was spoiled and had a bit of a princess syndrome, Zhongliang didn't see it as a problem. To him, a wife was someone to pamper, and as long as she had good character, that was enough. The two of them fell in love quickly after meeting. Whenever they had time, they would be together, inseparable. After marriage, they were very affectionate. Even though their parents pressured them, they had no intention of having children yet. They married young, still enjoying their time as a couple and not ready for a family. But accidents always happen unexpectedly. More than half a year into their marriage, while installing an air conditioner, Zhongliang fell from a height because of faulty equipment and hit his head. He was in a coma for 2 days, and the doctors gave him a critical prognosis, thinking he wouldn't make it. But he miraculously woke up, and everything seemed normal. Their whole family was ecstatic, especially his wife, who was overwhelmed with joy. After a few days of observation, Zhongliang was discharged from the hospital. He recovered over 3 months and returned to work as normal. The accident left him with a few fractures, but nothing too severe. His youth helped him recover quickly, and it didn't have much long-term effect. The company and insurance paid him a significant amount of compensation, making him feel that the pain was worth it. For him, his body seemed to be the same as before. The only problem was his increased sexual demands, which seemed endless. He would need it multiple times a day. He knew his age was one of vitality, and it was normal to want it frequently as long as he didn't feel tired or unwell. But since being discharged, once a day wasn't enough to satisfy him. He guessed it might be because he had been restrained during his hospital stay. Plus, his inactivity and good diet led to these heightened desires when he returned home. Every evening, after work, the first thing Zhongliang would do was satisfy his needs, as if he couldn't hold back any longer. If his wife had something to do or came home late, as soon as she stepped through the door, he would pounce on her without giving her a moment to breathe. Even when going to bed, there was always more to come. At first, his wife didn't mind much. Although she complained that he was too much, she secretly enjoyed it. But as his demands became more excessive 3 to 5 times a night, every day it seriously affected her sleep. After a year, they both looked frail and exhausted. The lack of sleep was taking its toll on her. While she enjoyed the process at night, her body simply couldn't handle it anymore. And Zhongliang had also lost weight, shedding over 30 pounds in a year. His six-pack abs looked chiseled as he worked out by satisfying his desires, averaging 20 minutes each time, 3 to 5 times a night. His wife suggested he see a doctor, but Zhongliang initially dismissed it. However, after more than a year of this, he found it increasingly difficult to endure the frustration when his needs weren't met. He realized something wasn't right. After an examination, doctors discovered that the head injury from the accident had damaged his brain. Any stimulation from the opposite sex triggered an excessive release of dopamine, the chemical responsible for pleasure and reward. This caused an overwhelming desire for strong pleasure and satisfaction. In simple terms, Zhongliang was now a sex addict. The doctors recommended regular physical therapy and psychological counseling. They warned against surgery due to their high risk. Zhongliang and his wife tried for a while to manage it. He limited himself to no more than twice a night to avoid disturbing her sleep. But he still couldn't be satisfied and often had to relieve himself in the middle of the night. The constant repression made him irritable, and his previously gentle nature began to show signs of aggression. The tension between the couple grew more frequent. So, on their second wedding anniversary, his wife finally couldn't take it anymore. In a moment of impulse, she said, "Go find another woman." The next morning, after breakfast, his wife hurried to work. Zhongliang was on a day off and didn't have to work. As she left, she noticed his downcast expression and couldn't help but feel pity. She knew that his way of relieving himself never quite satisfied him. Before she left, she hesitated and asked, "It's still early. If you want, we could go to the bedroom." Zhongliang understood her concern, but he also heard the resignation in her voice. He looked up and smiled, shaking his head. "You're tired from working all day, don't worry about me." She knew he still wanted it, but she had some information and just didn't have the energy. When he saw her off, she jokingly said, "Honey, you're so handsome. If you can't handle it, go find another woman." "I don't mind, really." Zhongliang laughed and nodded, "All right. I'll go out today and see if there's any woman who needs me." They were both joking, but there was some truth behind it. At this rate, they might not be able to stay together. Chapter 2: My disease can be cured. After Zhongliang cleaned up the table, he took a few tissues and came to the computer. He was going to ask the teachers who collected it for help. He had to relax once when he got up in the morning, otherwise he would be restless all day. As soon as he sat down, he felt an itch on his butt. He stretched out his hand and scratched it hard a few times, and he felt a stinging pain. Zhongliang came to the mirror, took off his pants and took a look. 4 or 5 blood-red herpes appeared vertically on his buttocks, which looked very large and did not look like mosquito bites. And it seemed to appear instantly, without any signs of discomfort in advance. He took off his pants and checked carefully, and found that there were also some small herpes around his thighs and knees. And there was a little discomfort around his knees, not very painful, but it was obviously uncomfortable from the inside out. After hesitating for a moment, he put on his pants and walked out. "I can't take time to communicate with the teachers, let's go to the hospital first." Zhongliang did not go to a big hospital, but came to a clinic not far from home. It has 3 floors and is not small in size. When he arrived at the outpatient department, a female doctor in her 40s received him. Zhongliang rolled up his trouser legs and let the doctor take a look at the herpes on his knee. The female doctor asked him, "Do you feel anything?" He shook his head. "It doesn't hurt or itch, but it hurts a little inside the knee. I can't tell whether it's the bone or the nerve." The female doctor looked down and looked carefully, but she was not sure which symptom it was. She was wearing a mask, and Zhongliang noticed that she had a pair of beautiful eyes. There were faint crow's feet at the corners of her eyes, which had a special charm and exuded a real and natural beauty. And her eyes were very clear, as if they had the effect of purifying the soul. It made Zhongliang's brain stop secreting dopamine instantly, and his thoughts were no longer controlled by carnal desires. In the past year, it was the first time that he had such a calm mind and felt that he was in full control of his desires. The female doctor was not sure what the symptom was, so she looked up and asked, "Are there any other rashes on other parts of the body?" At the same time, she also noticed He Zhongliang's obsessed eyes. The two looked at each other and felt a little embarrassed. He Zhongliang avoided the female doctor's eyes and answered nervously, "Yes, there are a few big ones on my butt." The female doctor narrowed her eyes slightly. She also had a good impression of this handsome young man. She smiled and greeted He Zhongliang, "Come behind the curtain, let me see." He Zhongliang quickly stood up and followed the female doctor behind the curtain, and noticed the female doctor's figure at the same time. She was of medium height and slender, but she was thin and not skinny and had a very elegant temperament, which made people want to protect and love her. The female doctor pulled the curtain and reminded, "Pull down your pants, let me see." He Zhongliang pulled down his pants, revealing most of his butt. The female doctor did not pay attention to the herpes at first, but was attracted by the boy's butt. Suddenly, she was excited and couldn't help blushing and hot. "I have been practicing medicine for so many years and have seen too many bodies of the opposite sex, but this is the first time I have such an unprofessional reaction. The fate between people is so wonderful." He Zhongliang secretes too much dopamine. The primitive carnal desire is like an elephant, running rampant in his body and cannot be controlled. As long as he sees the opposite sex, he can't help but be impulsive. No matter how good looking the other person is, as long as he doesn't look scary, he can accept it. But when he sees this female doctor, he won't have that kind of impulse. Even if she wears a mask, you can see that she is a beautiful woman with a good figure. She can help He Zhongliang control the elephant in his body. The female doctor has been calm for many years. When she works, she never has wild thoughts because of seeing the body of the opposite sex. But today, because of He Zhongliang's half-butt, her heart ripples and she has the idea of making herself embarrassed. She admits that this young man is very good-looking. Although he is thin, he is relatively strong. But she often sees good-looking patients of the opposite sex, and she has never been so excited in the past. He Zhongliang looked back at the female doctor and asked, "Doctor, what kind of symptoms are these?" The female doctor stopped staring blankly. Fortunately, she had a mask to cover her embarrassed expression. She quickly said, "Pull up your pants." She then opened the curtain and took He Zhongliang to sit outside. "You have several obvious herpes on your buttocks, which should be herpes zoster. But you found it early and you are young, so you should recover soon after a few days of intravenous drip." The female doctor comforted He Zhongliang while prescribing medicine. He Zhongliang had heard of this disease and asked curiously, "Is it also called snake around the waist?" The female doctor nodded, "Yes, it is called that in the countryside. Older people have low immunity and are more susceptible to this disease." "Then why do I have it on my buttocks and legs?" "This kind of herpes is distributed along the nerves. Your situation is also normal. Don't worry too much. In fact, you are so young, your own immunity should be able to recover. But since you have found it, treat it early, recover faster, and suffer less." He Zhongliang sighed and guessed that it might be because he had been overindulging in sex for more than a year and was under too much psychological pressure. That's why his immunity is low, allowing the virus to take advantage of the opportunity to enter. The female doctor noticed He Zhongliang's lost expression and reminded him with concern, "Pay attention to diet and rest, adjust your mentality, and don't put too much pressure on yourself. You will recover soon." Then she handed a list to He Zhongliang and told him, "Go over there to get the medicine. Then take the medicine to the second floor to get in for drip. I will prescribe you 2 days' worth of medicine first." When He Zhongliang took the list, he noticed the white and slender fingers of the female doctor. She was so beautiful, but she had no distractions about her. It was amazing. He pointed to the scribbled handwriting at the bottom of the list. "How do you read these 3 words?" The female doctor smiled, "That's my name, it has nothing to do with your medicine. I just want to know your name." Facing He Zhongliang's direct and frank attitude, the female doctor looked him in the eye and hesitated for a few seconds. She replied shyly, "My name is Shen Caiyue." He Zhongliang smiled, nodded and left excitedly. Shen Caiyue watched him leave, feeling unreal, wondering why she had thoughts about a young man. She took a deep breath, persuaded herself not to think too much, and then continued to ask the next patient. He Zhongliang took the medicine to the second floor, first got 2 injections in his buttocks, and then had to get 2 drips. It would take nearly 2 hours before he could leave. A young nurse gave him an injection, looked at his buttocks, and smiled shyly. After the injection, she asked him with concern, "Does it hurt?" He Zhongliang smiled and shook his head, "It's okay, it doesn't hurt. Go find an empty bed over there and wait." I'll get the drip in a while. The young nurse had a good impression of Zhongliang, and Zhongliang had only one idea about her. Only when facing Shen Caiyue could he maintain a calm and rational state of mind. Chapter 3: Their Wife's Helplessness. Zhongliang waited on the bed for a few minutes, and the nurse came over with a medicine bottle. She hung the medicine on the bracket at the head of the bed, checked his name, and began to insert an injection into his hand. Zhongliang sat on the bed, facing the nurse's chest. The bulge in his shirt collar made Zhongliang unable to help but think wildly and excited. He regretted that he should have solved it at home before coming. He quickly recalled his good medicine and the beautiful and clear eyes of the female doctor to help him drive away those obscene and crazy thoughts. I couldn't help asking the nurse, "How old is that Dr. Shen?" Dr. Shen. The nurse looked very surprised. She didn't understand why Zhongliang asked this question. Yes. It's the Dr. Shen Caiyue in your clinic. Looking at Zhongliang's excited and expectant expression, the nurse guessed that he had that idea. Frowning, she reminded him, "You have good taste. Mrs. Shen is very nice and beautiful. But she should be over 40. Her children are in high school this year. How old are you? Are you 30? I'm 26. Zhongliang confessed the truth and smiled awkwardly. I'm 2 years younger than you. The nurse told Zhongliang, and then asked mischievously, "Do you have a partner?" I'm married. Then why are you asking about Dr. Shen? The nurse glared at Zhongliang and said, "Call me when the medicine is almost gone." Then she put away her smile and turned away. Zhongliang looked at her twisting waist and hips, closed his eyes helplessly, and silently chanted a mittabur. During the infusion, Zhongliang thought a lot. It was not a solution for him to continue like this. Forcibly restraining physical needs would be too depressing psychologically and emotionally unbearable. If he got depression or went crazy, it would be troublesome. But if he indulges himself, his wife can't stand it. His body will be exhausted sooner or later. Now that he is young, he doesn't feel it obviously, but in a few years, he will probably have problems. He went to the hospital several times, and the psychologist and physical therapy had no effect at all. Surgery is too dangerous, and even the doctor doesn't recommend it, fearing that it will leave more serious sequelae. Although it was the first time he met the female doctor today, Zhongliang felt that she was his medicine and savior. If he lived with her, he would be able to maintain a stable mentality when he went home and faced her every day. In that case, how is it possible? Why would she live with me? Zhongliang covered his face and sighed, interrupting his crazy thoughts. After the infusion, it was almost noon. The nurse reminded him that he still had 1 day's supply of medicine, and told him not to forget to come for the injection tomorrow. Zhongliang had to go to work tomorrow and had no time during the day, so he asked, "What time does our clinic close at night?" The nurse told him, "We close at around 8 o'clock. It will take you about 2 hours to get the infusion, so you just need to arrive before 6 o'clock in the evening." Zhongliang nodded, turned and walked downstairs. When he passed the outpatient department, he saw Shen Caiyue talking to a patient. He smiled and moved over. Shen Caiyue saw him and asked with concern, "Have you finished the infusion?" Zhongliang nodded and asked awkwardly, "Dr. Shen doesn't eat lunch." He wanted to chat with Shen Caiyue, and it would be best if they could have a meal together and talk about the problems that bothered him. But he was embarrassed to speak because there were other patients around. After all, his disease could not be cured by ordinary outpatient clinics. Shen Caiyue was confused by Zhongliang's abrupt question. Why would a patient worry about whether the doctor eats lunch when he comes to the outpatient clinic? She replied politely, "Don't worry, we will arrange shifts to go upstairs for dinner later." "Oh, then I'll leave first." Zhongliang had nothing to say and said goodbye awkwardly. Shen Caiyue smiled and watched him leave, although she could sense that this young man seemed to have something to say. But it was not convenient for her to ask more questions about the patient except their condition. At the same time, she reminded herself not to think too much. Zhongliang returned home and tried to recall Shen Caiyue's appearance to restrain his desire. It worked a little, but not very obvious. Only when I saw her and felt her around, could I really calm down. My wife didn't come home at noon, so Zhongliang had a few bites of lunch by himself and sat in front of the computer. Please invite the teachers to make a brilliant appearance. Although solving it by yourself is not as good as quenching thirst in actual combat, the conditions are limited, and this is also a helpless solution. Zhongliang endured the torment and finally waited until the evening, and heard familiar footsteps, which should be the footsteps of his wife going upstairs. He couldn't wait any longer, and had been expecting his wife to come home early so that he could relax. Hearing the footsteps coming up the stairs getting closer and closer, he couldn't wait to get behind the door and prepare to open it. Suddenly, he heard the older sister from the opposite door come out and meet his wife, and the two began to chat. "Where are you going, sister?" "I'm too lazy to cook dinner, so I told my boyfriend not to go home after get off work and wait for me outside. We'll go out to eat." "Your boyfriend's company is great. He's a leader, so he must make a lot of money every year." "Well, not counting salary and other miscellaneous things, the year-end bonus alone is hundreds of thousands." Zhongliang's wife praised with envy. "Sister, you are so lucky. Your family conditions are also very good. The young couple is so young, there is no pressure at all. And your boyfriend is so handsome and so strong. If my boyfriend has that look and body, I would rather he earn less money." The sister's tone became more envious, and then she asked with a smile, "But your boyfriend has lost a lot of weight since we first got married. Does he love you very much?" Then he said seriously, "But this is not an occasional indulgence, it's every night. I have to go to work during the day. Who can stand it all year round?" Although the elder sister was envious, she nodded and admitted that it was indeed too much to do this every day. "Doctor, is there nothing you can do? I went to the hospital several times, but it didn't work." The two chatted outside for a while before the elder sister went downstairs and left. Zhongliang heard his wife open the door behind him, and he quickly sat on the sofa, trying his best to suppress his desire. Chapter for second meeting. When his wife entered the room, she saw Zhongliang sitting quietly on the sofa watching TV. She asked with relief, "Why are you so quiet today?" Usually, as soon as she came home in the evening, Zhongliang couldn't wait to pounce on her and pull her into the bedroom. "Of course, there are times when we are in the living room." Zhongliang glanced at his wife and smiled ashamedly. "Let's eat first." Then he went into the kitchen and brought out the meal that had been prepared long ago. When the two of them were having dinner, Zhongliang suddenly asked with a guilty look on his face, "Did you feel very hard and tired in the past year?" His wife looked at him blaming himself and comforted him distressedly. "There are also many happy and satisfying times. Tell me if you have any ideas. You are still so young and we don't have children. It's not too late for you to start a family." His wife neither agreed nor opposed, but it seemed that she had had the same thought. If Zhongliang continued like this, he would ruin his health sooner or later. When they first got married, he still had collagen on his face, and his skin was shiny, white and tender. In less than 2 years, he still looks handsome, but obviously thinner and older, with dull and pale skin. "My forehead used to be rosy white, but now it is black and looks unhealthy. Just wait and see. Maybe you'll get better soon." The wife was reluctant to divorce Zhongliang and still held onto the last glimmer of hope. But she was just deceiving herself, she was already prepared for the divorce. After finishing their meal, they walked into the bedroom. After more than 20 minutes, Zhongliang finally got a brief moment of peace. Before going to bed, Zhongliang held his wife in his arms and began to feel impatient again. The wife was no longer interested, but she still tried her best to satisfy him once more. After the incident, Zhongliang told his wife, "I will go to sleep in another room and will not disturb you in the second half of the night." The wife smiled and nodded, and warned him, "You'd better stop playing and go to sleep." Zhongliang said nothing and left the room with a smile. This kind of thing was not something he could have the final say on, especially when he was lying in bed late at night and felt like he was about to explode. He could resist his desire, but the result was a sleepless night, which made him feel even more tired the next day, which was not worth it. The next day, during breakfast, Zhongliang told his wife that he had to go to the clinic for 4 in the evening and would be home late. The wife looked at the herpes on his butt and legs and wondered why she hadn't noticed it last night. Just when his wife was puzzled, she noticed that Zhongliang's eyes began to become anxious again. I quickly pulled up his pants and said, "You're going to be late for work." Then he walked away quickly with a smile. Zhongliang also showed a helpless smile. His excessive demands scared his wife. When he is working during the day, his desires will subside a little so that he won't be so impulsive all the time. But at night, the spring tide would come like a raging wave, and it would be impossible to sleep peacefully without releasing it 3 or 4 times. In the evening, as night fell, Zhongliang began to feel hungry and thirsty again. Walking on the street, he didn't dare to look around. Especially some women with pretty faces and domineering figures, if they were dressed a little more revealingly, it would be fatal. The shock to Zhongliang was so great that he dared not even look at it. After entering the clinic, Zhongliang saw Shen Caiyue sitting in the outpatient department, talking to a patient. The moment he saw this woman, Zhongliang's lust subsided instantly. It was as if the dopamine in his body returned to normal as soon as he saw Shen Caiyue. Zhongliang smiled and went over to say hello. Dr. Shen, are you still off work? Shen Caiyue nodded at him. Yes, I'm on the night shift today. You should go up and get the infusion. It will be finished before I get off work. Before Zhongliang went upstairs, he tried to look at Shen Caiyue as much as possible to help himself maintain inner peace. Although it could not solve the problem from the root, it could at least make himself feel relaxed for a while. He is now sure that he can be saved. Shen Caiyue is his savior. At nearly 8 o'clock, Zhongliang came down from the second floor and found that Shen Caiyue was not in the outpatient department. He looked around and saw Shen Caiyue chatting with an older woman at the window where she was getting medicine. Zhongliang didn't feel comfortable going over to disturb her, so he just stared at Shen Caiyue's back for a while. I couldn't help but admire in my heart, what a beautiful back view. This woman has no blind spots at all. She looks beautiful no matter how you look at her. Zhongliang walked out of the clinic, his heart was still calm, and his desires were easier to control. But he knew that once he returned home, he would soon fall into a morbid state of insatiable desire. Not to mention that his wife couldn't stand it, he himself was a little afraid of himself who never stopped at night. Zhongliang stood at the door of the clinic and did not leave. He wanted to talk to Shen Caiyue. The woman looked very kind and might be willing to help him. The woman in the pharmacy noticed Zhongliang outside the glass door and asked curiously, Dr. Shen, is that young man outside waiting for you? Shen Caiyue looked outside and saw Zhongliang standing at the door, walking back and forth. That shouldn't be the case. Why is he waiting for me? The woman in the pharmacy reminded her, he was staring at you from behind just now, and his eyes were weird. Is he attracted to you? How is that possible? How old is he? You are so ridiculous. Shen Caiyue smiled and blamed her colleague. That's not necessarily true. Some guys like mature aunts. Besides, you've taken good care of yourself, so I don't think it's impossible for you two to. I'm not going to talk nonsense with you anymore. I'm going to change my clothes and get off work. Shen Caiyue said this and walked towards the locker room with a smile. After a moment, Shen Caiyue walked out of the clinic. She took off her white coat and wore a simple white shirt and black straight pants, plain but radiant. She also took off her mask. Beautiful eyes, perfect face shape and facial features. Zhongliang stood at the door and looked at Shen Caiyue who came out. He didn't dare to say hello for a while. When she was in the clinic, she had been wearing a mask. At this moment, Zhongliang couldn't recognize her. But his feeling about her didn't change. It must be her. Just when Zhongliang was hesitating about how to greet her, a middle-aged man got out of the Mercedes-Benz next to him and rushed to Shen Caiyue. With a smile on his face, he asked, "You're finally off work?" Shen Caiyue originally wanted to say hello to Zhongliang, but now she turned to face the middle-aged man and asked curiously, "Why are you still here? Haven't you gone home yet? I came to ask you out for dinner in the evening, but you said you had to work the night shift. Now that I'm finally off work, can you give me a chance and let's have dinner together? It's so late, let's just forget it. Besides, I'm not hungry. If you don't want to eat, you can just find a place to sit down." The man was still unwilling to give up and tried to ask Shen Caiyue out. Shen Caiyue didn't want to go out with him, but seeing his sincere attitude, she felt embarrassed to say it too directly. She actually looked at Zhongliang next to her with a helpless look. Chapter 5 Send her home. Shen Caiyue gave him a look, and Zhongliang quickly took 2 steps forward and asked nervously, "Dr. Shen, are you off work?" Shen Caiyue nodded, then stood with Zhongliang and looked helplessly at the man opposite her. The middle-aged man looked at Zhongliang carefully. Although he had a Mercedes-Benz and his financial conditions were good, Zhongliang was young and handsome. Standing next to Shen Caiyue, although the age difference was a bit big, they did look well matched. He understood instantly and said awkwardly, "Since you have something else to do, forget it, let's talk about it another day." Then he turned around and left tactfully, stepping on the accelerator and rushing out with anger in his heart. He didn't expect that Shen Caiyue, who looked conservative, would find a young man. It turned out that she was in her prime, and her usual serious appearance was all fake. After the man left, Shen Caiyue sighed and asked with a smile, "Why haven't you left yet? Are you waiting for someone here?" Zhongliang answered frankly, "Yes. Dr. Shen, I am waiting for you." The lights upstairs in the clinic were turned off, and the nurses were off work and about to come out. Shen Caiyue didn't want to stand at the door with Zhongliang, lest her colleagues see her and cause misunderstanding. "Let's talk while we walk." Zhongliang nodded quickly and followed Shen Caiyue out of the clinic. The two walked to a bus stop not far away. Shen Caiyue stopped and turned back to ask, "What are you waiting for me for?" Zhongliang felt very embarrassed and didn't know how to start, so he asked casually, "Do I need to come for tomorrow?" Shen Caiyue smiled and teased, "It's too dim here, and it doesn't look right to pull down your pants to see." At this time, a bus drove into the station, and Shen Caiyue left a message, "Come to the clinic again tomorrow." Seeing Shen Caiyue was about to leave, Zhongliang asked anxiously, "Dr. Shen, can I take you home? I have something else to tell you." Faced with Zhongliang's excessive request, Shen Caiyue should have decisively refused. But looking at his sincere attitude, Shen Caiyue actually hesitated. She neither agreed nor refused, and tacitly allowed Zhongliang to get on the bus with her. The two sat separately along their way and had no chance to talk. When they arrived at the stop, Zhongliang followed Shen Caiyue off the bus and came to the downstairs of her house. Shen Caiyue only then realized how ridiculous it was to bring home a young man whom she had only known for 2 days. The two of them stood under the streetlight, and at first glance they looked like a pair of lovers. "I can't take you home, just tell me what you want to say here." Zhongliang carefully looked at Shen Caiyue's face under the streetlight. He was so fascinated that he couldn't help but praise her. "Dr. Shen, you are really beautiful after taking off the mask. Is that all you want to tell me?" Shen Caiyue asked seriously, but she was not angry in her heart. She also had an inexplicable liking for Zhongliang, which she realized when she examined the herpes on the young man's buttocks. But she was sure that the two of them were not suitable for each other and didn't dare to think too much about it. Zhongliang put away his admiration and asked tentatively, "Is the man at the door of the clinic just now your friend?" Shen Caiyue sighed and answered helplessly, "He was introduced to me by a friend, but I don't think he and I are suitable. But he has been unwilling to give up, but when I saw him walk away today, he seemed angry. He probably won't pursue me again in the future. He thinks I'm your boyfriend, doesn't he?" Shen Caiyue glared at Zhongliang, trying her best to suppress her joyful expression, and reminded him, "Don't be disrespectful to me." "I'm sorry, Dr. Shen." Zhongliang quickly nodded to apologize and couldn't help staring at Shen Caiyue's slightly raised mouth corners. Curiously asked, "Are you single now?" "I got divorced a few years ago." Shen Caiyue answered honestly, and then continued to urge, "Do you have anything serious to say?" Yes. Zhongliang hesitated for a moment, then mustered up the courage to explain, "About a year ago, I was working at a height and fell from a height. I suffered a head injury and was in a coma for 2 days in the hospital before I woke up. It was like a near-death experience. After the examination, nothing unusual was found, and he was discharged smoothly. But as his body gradually recovered, his libido became unusually strong. It's okay when I'm busy at work during the day, but once I lie in bed at night, I'm very eager. 3 to 5 times a night, every day, it makes myself and my wife exhausted physically and mentally. If I can't get satisfaction, I can't fall asleep all night. I'm not an expert in that area. You should go see a neurologist or a psychologist." Shen Caiyue seriously suggested to Zhongliang, although what Zhongliang said sounded ridiculous. But as a doctor, Shen Caiyue did not doubt his words. "I know. I've been to the doctor several times and tried many methods suggested by the doctor. But none of them worked. I couldn't stop those impulsive thoughts in the dead of night. If this continues, I don't know how long I can hold on." Shen Caiyue looked at Zhongliang's face and turned on the flashlight on her phone. She reached out to touch his face and carefully observed his eyes, hair, skin, and some details. "Stick out your tongue and see." Zhongliang complied with Shen Caiyue's request and did not rush to explain. After a moment, Shen Caiyue reminded him distressedly, "You have indeed indulged yourself too much. You are strong on the outside but weak on the inside. If you don't take good care of yourself, your body will have problems. I have a friend who is a well-known expert in this field. She lives abroad and is planning to return to China soon. Please prepare your medical records and past medical records, and I will make an appointment with her to take you to see the doctor. The clinic has your phone number. I will call you after I make an appointment with her. It's useless. I've been to other hospitals and the experts said the same thing. It doesn't work. Zhongliang no longer had any hope in what those experts said. She's my friend, and she's very experienced in this area. It's a rare opportunity to meet her, so go and give it a try. Shen Caiyue comforted him, and seeing that Zhongliang had no expectations, she asked curiously, "If you don't want me to help you, why are you telling me all this?" Zhongliang replied, "You can help me yourself." Shen Caiyue helplessly reminded again, "I said that's not my major. It has nothing to do with my professional expertise as a doctor. As soon as I see you, I will stop having those crazy thoughts and return to a normal and rational state." Shen Caiyue murmured in disbelief, "Am I so unfeminine?" Zhongliang explained excitedly, No, you are very beautiful and have a good figure. You are very feminine and attractive. But you can help me restrain that kind of morbid desire and let me just desire you like a normal person." As soon as Shen Caiyue frowned, Zhongliang immediately shut up, knowing that he didn't express himself very well. He lowered his head in shame, covered half of his face with his hands, and sighed helplessly. Shen Caiyue looked at Zhongliang's white, tender and slender hands, and her heart was actually filled with ripples. She hadn't felt this kind of springtide for many years. She had this impulse when she checked Zhongliang's buttocks for herpes that day. After that, she couldn't forget about this young man, but she knew that they couldn't be together, so she didn't want to admit that she was tempted. "Okay, you don't have to explain. There are indeed some subtle feelings between people. I can understand what you mean. But I still hope you can go with me to meet that friend and see what she says." Chapter 7 Going home with her. After they entered the bedroom, their wife asked helplessly, "Do you want more tonight?" Zhongliang was also helpless and replied with shame, "Of course I did. I started to get anxious not long after I got home." Seeing his wife's tired and resisting look, he discussed again, "Forget it. You should go to bed early. I'll go to that room." His wife held his hand and comforted him, "I'll help you this time. You can go to sleep in that room after I'm done. I know you'll be busy sleeping in that room. You can't go on like this. You'd better let that old lady help you as soon as possible. She's not that old, so you can just call her big sister. Even if you call her auntie, there's no need to add the word old in front of her." Hearing Zhongliang's correction, his wife laughed and blamed him, "Zhongliang, you are so good, you are now speaking for her. Have you already decided to spend your whole life with her?" Zhongliang did not answer, but explained with an innocent expression, "If I don't stay with her, my life will be in danger. I don't think I have any other choice. I have to stick with her no matter how shameless I am. Yes. God's plan is the best. I can't blame you." His wife couldn't help but make a joke and expressed her understanding for him. She had had enough of it this year. Was she really going to wait until the day her husband's health broke down and then end up like that? Although she was reluctant to separate from her husband, if that woman could really help Zhongliang recover his health, separation would be the best option for both of them. A day of marriage brings 100 days of love, and 100 days of marriage is as deep as the sea. What's more, you can have sex several times in one night. As a couple, we both hope that the other can live a better life. The next day, Zhongliang went straight to the clinic to find Shen Caiyue after get off work. Shen Caiyue got off work early today and was about to leave after changing her clothes when she saw Zhongliang walk into the clinic and walk towards her. Curiously asked, "Are you feeling unwell?" Zhongliang politely replied, "No, I just came to see you, you are off work now. Come here." Shen Caiyue called him aside, touched his thin face, and examined him carefully again. Worriedly asked, "How many times did you have sex last night?" Zhongliang lowered his head and whispered the truth, "I went back to see my wife once, went back to another room, and then did it twice by myself in the second half of the night. I think you've reached your limit. You can't go on like this. It will cause big problems. My friend will be returning home in 2 days, and I've already made an appointment with her. Can't you restrain yourself for 2 days?" I tried to control myself for a whole night, but it was very hard. I couldn't sleep the whole night. I had to go to work the next day, and I felt even more tired. Last night was a little better because I met and talked with you. Normally, if I want to sleep until dawn, 3 times is sometimes not enough. After listening to this, Shen Caiyue felt sorry for him but also felt a little amused. So why did you come to see me today? Nothing, I just want to see you. Seeing you will make me less impulsive and help me calm down and relax. I would like to treat you to a meal if you have time. Shen Caiyue looked at Zhongliang's expectant and nervous expression and guessed, you just want to spend more time with me, right? Zhongliang sighed and confided helplessly, I don't want to disturb you, but I am very tired after a day's work, but I am extremely excited when I see my wife when I get home. I am a little afraid of that feeling. Even if I am excited for a few days in a row, I can at least take a day off. I am so exhausted from not taking a rest for 365 days a year. Shen Caiyue couldn't help but feel sorry for the young man and raised her hand to give him a hug. But there were too many people around, so she didn't dare to touch him. It was just a friendly invitation, I don't like going out to eat. If you don't mind, come home with me and have a meal. Then he led Zhongliang out of the clinic. Zhongliang followed her and asked cautiously, are you home alone? Didn't I tell you last time? I'm single now. My daughter lives in the high school dormitory and only comes home once a week on weekends. Thank you for trusting me so much and taking me home. When Shen Caiyue first met Zhongliang, she had a special liking for him. She even developed feelings and desire for him, which went far beyond simple trust. But she was too embarrassed to respond or believe that feeling, so she casually told Zhongliang, I don't think you are a bad person, I just treat you as a patient. Zhongliang quickly nodded to express his gratitude, Dr. Shen, you are such a kind person. A doctor should be as caring as a parent. Your condition is indeed very serious and special. When Shen Caiyue thought of Zhongliang's strange disease, she turned around to look at him and couldn't help but smile shyly. Zhongliang was attracted by her sweet smile. She was so beautiful and charming, but she could suppress the restless desire. Zhongliang felt that he was ridiculous and funny, and could only smile awkwardly without saying anything. Shen Caiyue brought Zhongliang back home, a 3-bedroom, 1-living-room apartment of about 100 square meters. The decoration and furniture were not very high-end, but it was very clean and tidy. Every corner gives people a comfortable feeling. Just sit on the sofa and wait for a while. I'll go to the kitchen to cook a simple home-cooked meal, which will be ready soon. Shen Caiyue gave some instructions and walked towards the kitchen. Zhongliang followed closely and discussed with her, I often cook at home, and I am embarrassed to bother you. Let me help you with some work. Shen Caiyue turned around and advised earnestly, it's too crowded for 2 people to stand in the kitchen, and I'm not used to being disturbed by others while I'm cooking. Just wait patiently. We'll be able to eat soon. Well then. Sorry to trouble you. Zhongliang nodded and retreated back to the sofa helplessly. Shen Caiyue walked into the kitchen with a smile, took a deep breath to regulate her breathing, put one hand on her chest, and couldn't help feeling excited. This was the first time I brought a man home after all these years of divorce, and I started to have all kinds of wild thoughts. How old is he? There's a generation gap between us. And he's a patient, is he going to take advantage of his situation? Shen Caiyue blamed herself in her heart, stopped those inappropriate thoughts, and immediately started preparing dinner. Chapter 8 Fell asleep on the sofa. Zhongliang sat on the sofa, looking at the kitchen door. Although he couldn't see Shen Caiyue, he could vaguely hear the sounds coming from inside. She was busy inside. Feeling everything in this house, Zhongliang suddenly had a sense of déjà vu, as if he had experienced it in his previous life. He knew that his fate with Shen Caiyue must be extraordinary. Maybe I fantasized about such a woman in my previous life and really met her in this life. It is true that what God has arranged is the greatest. Goddess will cannot be violated. Zhongliang had never felt so comfortable and relaxed since he was injured in an accident. He leaned back on the sofa, feeling tired physically but at peace mentally. He felt extremely sleepy, and his upper and lower eyelids began to fight with each other. I collapsed on the sofa and soon fell asleep. 20 minutes later, Shen Caiyue brought the food to the dining table and gently called to the sofa, come and eat. Seeing that Zhongliang didn't respond, she took off her apron and walked towards the sofa. When I came to the sofa, I saw Zhongliang lying on it in a crooked position. He looked very uncomfortable, but he was sleeping soundly. Shen Caiyue wanted to ask him to get up and eat, but she raised her hand and stopped it in the air with an embarrassed expression. I guess he might not have had a good night's sleep for a long time. Seeing him sleeping so soundly, I really couldn't bear to wake him up. But the food is ready. Shen Caiyue hesitated for a moment and decided not to disturb him from sleeping. She could reheat the food if it got cold. He really needs to rest well, recuperate and recharge his energy. Shen Caiyue wanted him to sleep more comfortably, but she definitely couldn't hold Zhongliang with her own strength. Even though he was now much thinner and more haggard, he still weighed more than 130 pounds, and was so big that Shen Caiyue was helpless. I had no choice but to take out pillows and blankets from the bedroom, straighten Zhongliang's body, and let him sleep on the sofa. After everything was arranged, Shen Caiyue was about to leave when she was suddenly attracted by Zhongliang's profile. She sat beside him and looked at him carefully, questioning herself in her heart. Was it because she had been alone for too long and was beginning to have sexual urges? Or was this young man really meant to be with her? Although Shen Caiyue is low-key and modest, she knows that she has good conditions in all aspects. If God really wants to help her end her single life, it is not difficult. But why can't he arrange a man of similar age for her? I am 42 years old this year, 16 years older than this young man. And he is married. This sudden fate is too ridiculous. Shen Caiyue was trapped in her own size, but her eyes were reluctant to leave Zhongliang's profile. It was past 10 o'clock in the evening when Shen Caiyue put the food in the pot, planning to wait for Zhongliang to wake up before they eat together. But now I am already sleepy, and Zhongliang is still sleeping soundly, with no sign of waking up. It seems that if I don't wake him up, he will not get up tonight. Just when Shen Caiyue was wondering whether she should wake him up, Zhongliang's cell phone rang in his pocket, and the vibration and ringtone woke him up. Zhongliang opened his eyes drowsily, lifted the blanket and took out his cell phone. It was his wife calling. After he answered the phone, he heard his wife's voice. Have you gone to see that old lady again? Are you coming home tonight? Zhongliang was half asleep. He glanced at Shen Caiyue in front of him, then looked around before he realized where he was. I quickly replied, yes, I am with her, I will go home now. After hanging up the phone, Zhongliang glanced at his phone and found that it was already past 10 o'clock. I said to myself in shame, why did I fall asleep? Then he said goodbye to Shen Caiyue and prepared to leave. Shen Caiyue asked anxiously, aren't you going to eat before leaving? Eat? Did I fall asleep before I even eat? Zhongliang covered his stomach with a confused look on his face. He was really feeling hungry. Shen Caiyue smiled and reminded, yes. You fell asleep when I was cooking, and I didn't have the heart to wake you up. It's all ready, let's eat first. It was already so late, and there was still time for a meal. Zhongliang nodded awkwardly. I'll turn on the fire and heat up the food. It will be ready in 2 or 3 minutes. Don't fall asleep again. Shen Caiyue instructed with a smile on her face and walked quickly towards the kitchen. Zhongliang rubbed his face, sleeping so hard that he could hardly tell the difference between day and night. He had never slept so soundly in the past year, and felt full of strength. He stood up and walked to the kitchen door, and saw Shen Caiyue standing in front of the stove, staring at the steamer with a smile on her face. She turned around and saw Zhongliang, so she put away her smile and asked, what are you doing standing at the door? Stand here for a while. I'm afraid I'll fall asleep again. Looking at Zhongliang blinking his eyes, he looked like he was not quite sober. Shen Caiyue couldn't help laughing and told him, go sit at the dining table. Warm it up a little, it will be ready soon. 10 minutes later, Shen Caiyue looked at Zhongliang wolfing down his food. She felt happy from the bottom of her heart and said, it seems you are really hungry. Zhongliang nodded, swallowed the food in his mouth, and urged, eat quickly. Didn't you not eat either? It's so late now. If it weren't for your company, I wouldn't want to eat a single bite. You shouldn't have waited for me, you could have just eaten first. I don't work hard during the day, so eating less at night is good for my body, so I can consider it as losing weight. Do you still need to lose weight with your figure? I don't think it's necessary. At my age, it's too late to lose weight after I get fat. I can't compare with you young people. When Shen Caiyue mentioned the age difference between them, she suddenly felt a sense of loss. You're not that old, you look about 30 years old. Zhongliang glanced at her secretly with a smile. You're so smooth talking, why don't you eat your meal? Although she knew that Zhongliang was trying to please her, Shen Caiyue was still very happy. It turned out that she didn't like men with smooth tongues before, but she just didn't like those men, and it had nothing to do with smooth tongues. After Shen Caiyue put down her bowl and chopsticks, she propped her face with one hand and watched Zhongliang clean up the food like a whirlwind. She felt very relieved and praised with satisfaction, "You are quite a good eater. You are such a great cook. Before I came to your house for dinner, I always thought I could cook, but it seems I have misunderstood myself." Shen Caiyue rolled her eyes at Zhongliang, making her feel a little uncomfortable with his praise. "Go home quickly after eating. Don't let your wife worry about you." Shen Caiyue urged Zhongliang to go home. When he was sent to the door, he solemnly warned him, "Go back and sleep well, don't let your mind wander anymore. Your body needs a long rest before it can recover." "I see. Anyway, it's pretty normal now, but I don't know what will happen when I get home." Zhongliang left without finishing his words. He wanted to go home and sleep while his emotions were relatively stable. He hoped that he could continue sleeping and sleep until dawn. Chapter 9: The Best Choice. When Zhongliang returned home, his wife was waiting for him in the living room. She asked in surprise, "You really went to that old lady's house? And you slept there?" "I originally wanted to invite her to have dinner together, but she invited me to her house. While she was cooking in the kitchen, I fell asleep on the sofa and have been sleeping ever since." Zhongliang said this and walked into the room. Their wife followed up, "Are you so free of distractions when you are with her?" "Yeah. I just want to go to bed now. I hope I can sleep well tonight." Zhongliang took off his clothes and went to bed, and urged his wife, "Don't disturb me in this room, go back to your bedroom and sleep." Okay, then go to bed early." Their wife nodded repeatedly and quickly left her husband's room. Zhongliang tried to keep himself calm and fall asleep as soon as possible. But after lying there for more than half an hour, he started to have random thoughts again and couldn't stop. His brain began to secrete dopamine again, disturbing him. Even if he tried hard to recall Shen Caiyue, it was useless. He couldn't deceive himself. He knew very well that the woman was not here, and he couldn't calm himself down. The next morning, when his wife prepared breakfast, she saw Zhongliang coming out of the room, looking listless and exhausted. "I walked up to him and asked distressedly, 'Didn't you lose control again last night?' 'I got it under control, but I didn't sleep all night.' Zhongliang shook his head helplessly. Although he did not indulge in his desires, he did not gain any advantage. Insomnia all night was also very harmful to the body. For a healthy young person, occasional insomnia is no big deal and he can make up for it by eating a full meal and having a good sleep. But he had been overdrawn for a year and no longer had the money to stay up late. After breakfast, Zhongliang endured all night and looked at his wife with eyes like a hungry beast seeing its prey. Their wife understood and said, "Hurry up. Otherwise you will be late for work." Then she stood up and walked towards the bedroom with a helpless look on her face. She was already exhausted physically and mentally, and had no interest in doing so. She just wanted to help her husband. Zhongliang knew that he shouldn't torture himself, but if he didn't vent, he would be restless, so he had to rush into the bedroom. After finishing, the two went out and went downstairs together. His wife looked at Zhongliang's tired and haggard appearance, and comforted him distressedly, "Husband, you can't go on like this. If being with that aunt can keep you healthy, then you should try to pursue her and live with her. I don't blame you." Zhongliang understood that his wife was planning to give up the marriage. She must have considered it for a long time and made a decision after careful consideration. The two walked down the stairs in silence, without continuing to discuss the issue. But they both knew in their hearts that separation was the best solution. After get off work in the evening, Zhongliang came to the clinic again. Shen Caiyue was treating a patient. She turned around and glanced at Zhongliang's haggard appearance. She knew that he did not sleep well last night. "I'm off work late today. Have you eaten yet?" Zhongliang shook his head, looking weak. Shen Caiyue suggested distressedly, "Go eat first." Zhongliang nodded, turned and left the clinic, walking towards a noodle shop not far away. Half an hour later, Zhongliang returned to the clinic and sat in the waiting area, occasionally glancing at Shen Caiyue. He couldn't help dozing off and almost fell off the chair several times. Shen Caiyue looked at his funny appearance, feeling both distressed and amused. Finally, it was past 8 o'clock, and Zhongliang dozed off while leaning against a chair, almost slipping off the chair. He suddenly opened his eyes and saw Shen Caiyue standing in front of him after changing her clothes. He quickly stood up and asked expectantly, "Are you off work?" Shen Caiyue smiled and nodded, "You have already had dinner, why are you still waiting for me here?" Nothing, just came to see you. Let me take you home. My friend will be returning home tomorrow, and I have an appointment with her to have dinner together in the evening. You can go with me then and hear what she thinks of your situation. Zhongliang nodded and followed Shen Caiyue out of the clinic. The two of them stood downstairs of Shen Caiyue's building. Zhongliang was too embarrassed to speak and could only say goodbye awkwardly. Shen Caiyue called him, "Can you sleep well when you go back tonight?" Zhongliang shook his head and confessed helplessly, "As long as you are not by my side, I will soon have a seizure and will not be able to calm down." If any other man said such absurd words, Shen Caiyue would definitely think he was a liar. But for Zhongliang, she did not doubt him at all. She believed that this young man was really desperate and would only pester her. "Will your wife call you again tonight?" "No, no, she also supports me coming to you." Shen Caiyue couldn't help but smile and teased, "She must have been exhausted by your torment, right? She did it for my own good. She didn't want to see me getting weaker day by day." Zhongliang lowered his head in shame, very disappointed with himself. "If she doesn't mind, you can go to my house tonight and have a good sleep. Get some rest, and I'll take you to see that expert friend tomorrow evening." Shen Caiyue invited Zhongliang to go home with her. Zhongliang let out a long sigh and followed him upstairs. He finally got some rest tonight, he was already exhausted. Shen Caiyue took Zhongliang to a room, tidied it up simply, and planned to let him sleep there. Zhongliang took off his coat and couldn't wait to lie down on the bed. He had never felt so relaxed before. "You look so sleepy, go to bed early." Shen Caiyue was about to turn around and leave. Zhongliang suddenly asked, "Can you sit with me for a while? I will fall asleep in less than 2 minutes if you stay next to me." Shen Caiyue frowned, sat on the edge of the bed, and looked at Zhongliang expectantly. Smiling and holding his hand, Is this okay? Close your eyes now." Zhongliang almost cried. He didn't understand what magic this woman had that could make him so relaxed and at ease. "Dr. Shen, thank you." Zhongliang expressed his gratitude excitedly, and then closed his eyes. Finally, he was no longer controlled by dopamine and could enjoy a normal sleep. Sure enough, in less than 2 minutes, Zhongliang's breathing became steady, with a slight snoring sound. He fell asleep, and with the help of Shen Caiyue, he finally had his first peaceful and restful night since his injury. Shen Caiyue gently let go of Zhongliang's hand and wanted to stroke his face, but tried hard to suppress that strange thought. Could it be that I really have a connection with him in my previous life? If it wasn't arranged by God, how could we know each other in this way? And let me become the medicine to save him, or maybe he is lying and just fooling me. But I know that my feelings for him are real, and I can't be deliberately deceiving myself. Shen Caiyue looked at Zhongliang's face and muttered to herself in confusion. After a moment, she comforted herself, "Let everything go with the flow. Then slowly stand up, turn off the light, leave the room and gently close the door." Chapter 10, Meeting the Experts. The next morning, Zhongliang opened his eyes and felt like he was reborn. "In the past year, I have felt extremely weak and sleepy every morning after opening my eyes. This morning, I finally said goodbye to that pain and found the long-lost vitality again." Zhongliang walked out of the room, came to the kitchen door, and looked at Shen Caiyue who was preparing breakfast inside. Her eyes were focused and serious, and her slender fingers were flexible and skillful. She was wearing a simple knitted top and trousers, as well as a simple apron, but it could not hide her graceful figure. Her long, smooth hair was casually tied behind her head, with a few strands of hair falling on her fair neck, showing her gentle temperament. The sunlight shone through the window onto her face, and that scene fascinated Zhongliang. Maybe he had a good rest last night, which made him feel aroused towards this woman. But it was not the kind of lust that he could not control, close but different. Even if he could not get her, he would not feel pain, and the feeling of anticipation and desire was also a kind of happiness. Shen Caiyue noticed Zhongliang standing in a daze at the kitchen door, stopped what she was doing, walked closer to the door and looked at his face carefully. Then he nodded with satisfaction, "You look better now than yesterday. It seems that you had a good rest last night." "Yes. I slept until dawn. I haven't slept so soundly in a long time. Your hair is a mess. Go wash your face. You can eat soon," Shen Caiyue urged, then turned around and went back to work. Zhongliang looked at her back, thin but not skinny, with beautiful curves. Shen Caiyue turned around and looked him in the eye, and asked curiously, do you have anything else to say? No, no. Zhongliang quickly put away his admiration and hurriedly turned to the bathroom. While the two were having breakfast, Zhongliang's wife called him and they chatted briefly. After hanging up the phone, Shen Caiyue asked, "Is your wife worried about you?" Zhongliang replied, "She just wanted to make sure that I could return to a normal state as long as I was with you." Shen Caiyue was a little embarrassed and asked a little embarrassedly, "Won't she be jealous?" "No, she doesn't want us to continue like that. If I can stay healthy living with you, she thinks it's best for us to separate. That's better for everyone." "Living with you?" Shen Caiyue exclaimed in surprise. She just wanted to help this young man recover his health, so why was the progress so fast? Although she was very excited and looking forward to it, she couldn't believe it for a moment and didn't know how to accept it. Looking at Shen Caiyue's surprised expression, Zhongliang quickly explained, "That's not what I meant. I'll rent you a room and you'll be my landlord. We can live together this way." "I don't plan to rent a room, and can you live alone forever?" Shen Caiyue was not very satisfied with what Zhongliang said. In fact, he could have that meaning, and Shen Caiyue would be happier. "Maybe after a period of recuperation, I won't get sick again, and then I won't have to bother you anymore." "Whatever you want. Let my friend help you take a look tonight," Shen Caiyue said casually with a serious expression. Zhongliang didn't know why she was suddenly unhappy, and wondered in his heart, could it be that she had the same idea? He secretly glanced at Shen Caiyue's face and nervously discussed, "If I get sick whenever I leave you in the future, I wonder if you can consider it." "Considering what?" As soon as Shen Caiyue asked the question, she reacted. She understood what Zhongliang meant, but she didn't dare to respond directly. Before Zhongliang could make his point, she quickly said perfunctorily, "Let's observe for a while before we talk." Zhongliang nodded repeatedly. Since he was not rejected, it meant there was a chance, which made him overjoyed. After dinner, the two went to work and made an appointment to meet the expert in the evening. Today was the most relaxing day for Zhongliang since he was injured. It also made him determined not to go back to his old life. Whether it was to save his life or because of a special fate, he had to be with Shen Caiyue. In the evening, Zhongliang came to the address given by Shen Caiyue and met at a high-end hotel. Originally, the old friend came back to China with the intention of having a meal with Shen Caiyue to reminisce about the past. Now that Shen Caiyue brought Zhongliang along, the friend didn't feel comfortable objecting. Shen Caiyue's friend is 3 years younger than her. She graduated from the same university and is considered her junior. She went abroad to study and settled abroad. Although they are 3 years apart, they have a very good relationship. "This is the patient I told you about. It's been more than a year and there has been no improvement." Shen Caiyue introduced Zhongliang's situation to her friend, whose surname is Huang. After carefully looking at Zhongliang, the friend told Shen Caiyue, "Let's talk about it after dinner. It's been a long time since we last met. Tell me how you have been these past 2 years. Are you still living alone?" The friend didn't care much about Zhongliang's illness, but talked to Shen Caiyue about their past and current life. Leaving Zhongliang awkwardly aside. From their conversation, Zhongliang could tell that Dr. Huang had a completely different personality and outlook on life from Shen Caiyue. She has a very open personality and advocates living life to the fullest. She has been married 3 times, her first husband was a foreigner, her second was a local, and her third was also a foreigner. She also has many lovers outside, but she always gets along well with everyone. It can be seen that although she is indulgent, she is a person of integrity. When they talked about some emotional and physical topics about Shen Caiyue, both Shen Caiyue and Zhongliang felt very embarrassed. Shen Caiyue signaled to her friend not to be so explicit, but Zhongliang felt that he was in their way and really wanted to find a hole in the ground to crawl into. Although he was very interested in everything about Shen Caiyue, he felt embarrassed to talk about women's topics nakedly in front of 2 aunts who still had charm. Dr. Huang saw that Zhongliang was fidgeting, so he gave him the room card and told him his room number. He asked him to go upstairs and wait, and after he and Shen Caiyue finished their meal, they would go upstairs to talk about his condition. Shen Caiyue was a little surprised, but did not stop it. Zhongliang glanced at Shen Caiyue and seeing that she had no objection, he followed Dr. Huang's instructions and went to her room to wait. After Zhongliang left, Shen Caiyue asked curiously, "Why did you let him go to your room?" "I want to understand his situation. I have my own way, so don't worry about it. Unless your relationship with him is more than just that of a doctor and a patient. The friend stared into Shen Caiyue's eyes, suspecting that her relationship with Zhongliang was not simple. Shen Caiyue quickly explained, "Do you think I'm the same as you? He and I have nothing to do with each other. We don't have any messy relationship." "Then I'm relieved. In fact, even if you have a relationship with him, I don't mind. You are living more and more freely and at your own will, and you haven't restrained yourself at all even as you get older. Why should I restrain myself? The older I get, the more I need to learn to enjoy myself." The two began to talk about interesting things in the past and women's private topics. Chapter 12, Planning for the Future. After Shen Caiyue brought Zhongliang home, they didn't have much communication and went back to their own rooms to rest. Zhongliang was not very sleepy. He sat on the bed in a daze. After taking a shower, Shen Caiyue saw that the light in Zhongliang's room was still on and the door was not closed. She stood at the door, wiping her hair with a towel, and asked with concern, "Why aren't you asleep yet? Aren't you sleepy tonight?" Zhongliang looked at Shen Caiyue, who had just finished taking a bath. She was as fresh and refined as a lotus emerging from the water, and as gentle as jade. She was wearing a silver white silk nightgown with the hem above her knees, which covered her thighs but not completely. The vague beauty and temptation of the flesh appearing and disappearing. Zhongliang stared at Shen Caiyue with his eyes wide open, stunned and speechless. Shen Caiyue noticed Zhongliang's expression, took 2 steps back, and asked shyly, "Didn't you say that you would be very calm as soon as you saw me? The impulse towards you is normal and can be controlled." No, I am not impulsive towards you. I just think you are very beautiful and attractive. I just admire you. I don't mean to disrespect you." Zhongliang gave an incoherent, nervous and excited explanation. "Okay. You don't have to explain. I don't blame you." Shen Caiyue comforted him, and her heart couldn't help but bloom with joy. Zhongliang was overindulging himself, and she hadn't bloomed for many years. It is impossible to say that she does not want to, but she has not met the right man. In addition, she is a conservative person, so she has never had the opportunity to satisfy her desires. Although she was unwilling to admit it, she also knew that this was not a good thing. But she had a crush on Zhongliang when she first met him, especially when she pulled down his pants to check him. She always remembered the heat and inexplicable excitement she felt. "If you plan to live here permanently, bring your toiletries here tomorrow. Or I can buy some for you." Shen Caiyue hoped that Zhongliang could live in her house permanently. Before she fell in love with him, she didn't feel lonely living alone. "But now I am alone at home, and I feel empty, lonely and lost. No, I can just go home and get it tomorrow. Can you just think of it as renting this room to me? Whatever you want. How much rent do I pay you every month? It doesn't matter. It's up to you whether you give it or not. It's up to you." Shen Caiyue was too lazy to care about these things, and reminded carefully, "Is your wife really not angry that you live in my house?" Although there was nothing innocent between the two of them, and their main purpose was to save people, they just had feelings for each other in their hearts, but no one would know if they didn't say it out loud. But Zhongliang is married after all. If his wife comes to him to pursue the matter, he will not be able to explain himself. She won't be angry. She encouraged me to get close to you in the beginning. She still cares about you. Because she had a crush on Zhongliang, Shen Caiyue felt somewhat guilty and said, "You should go to bed early." Before leaving, he was about to reach out to close the door. Zhongliang quickly discussed, "Can you please not close the door? I feel closer to you with the door open, and I can sleep more peacefully. Are you still little? Do you need me to put you to sleep?" Shen Caiyue smiled and teased, putting the two in an awkward situation. They both lowered their heads shyly, not wanting to face each other. After Shen Caiyue left, Zhongliang dared to whisper, "Of course." Then he lay on the bed, closed his eyes, and the scene of Shen Caiyue just now appeared in his mind. He couldn't help but raise the corners of his mouth. The next day at noon, Zhongliang went to his wife's workplace to find her. His wife worked in a shopping mall as a cashier. Zhongliang did not call in advance, and when he arrived at the mall he did not see his wife. His wife's colleague told him that it was lunchtime for the shift. Zhongliang was about to call to inquire when one of his wife's colleagues came back from lunch and told him, "Your wife is eating at the spicy hot pot restaurant on the 2nd floor. You just love to eat that stuff." Zhongliang smiled and chatted with them for a few words, then went to the 2nd floor to find his wife. Arriving at the spicy hot pot restaurant on the 2nd floor, Zhongliang stood at the door and looked around, and sure enough, he found his wife. She was having dinner with a male colleague. There was nothing big about colleagues having dinner together, but their actions were too intimate. They took food from each other's bowls, talked and laughed, and wiped each other's mouths with tissues. The scene is very warm and sweet, maybe they didn't mean it. But lovers don't need to show it deliberately, an ambiguous atmosphere will be revealed. Zhongliang did not go forward to disturb her and slowly left the store. Although he felt bad, he was not very angry. He had actually been attracted to Shen Caiyue for a long time, which could be considered mental infidelity strictly speaking. She believed that her wife was just planning for the future and probably hadn't done anything out of the ordinary. After Zhongliang's wife finished her meal and returned to work, her colleague asked her, "You're back so early. Why don't you spend more time with your husband?" "I didn't see him. He went looking for you a long time ago, didn't he find you?" Zhongliang's wife was shocked, and felt that something might have happened. She said casually, "Maybe he had something urgent to do and left again. Then I took out my phone and hesitated for a moment, but still didn't have the courage to call." In the evening, Zhongliang called his wife and asked her to meet him at a noodle restaurant near their home. When his wife arrived, she saw Zhongliang was already waiting for her, with 2 boxes next to the table. After their wife sat down, she asked nervously, "Why do you carry so much luggage?" Zhongliang answered frankly, "I want to move to Dr. Shen's house." "Well, you should rest for a while. How long do you plan to stay before you go home?" The wife had an uneasy expression on her face, and perhaps she herself didn't know what answer she wanted to hear. Zhongliang calmly asked back, "When do you want me to come back?" Their wife's eyes were red, and she didn't know how to answer, so she asked carefully, "You went to that spicy hot pot restaurant at noon today, and saw me, didn't you?" Zhongliang nodded and did not deny it. Their wife explained helplessly, "Nothing happened between me and that male colleague, really, you have to believe me. But you have feelings for each other and plan to be together in the future, right? Then what do you want me to do? How can I not mind watching you live in another woman's house? I just..." Their wife couldn't continue speaking and took out 2 tissues to wipe her tears. "I know you care about me and worry about my health. You are doing this for my own good. I understand and appreciate you. Thank you for staying with me for so long. I was the one who let you down first. If he truly treats you well, you should give him a chance. I also hope that you will be happier in the future." The wife grabbed Zhongliang's hand and asked excitedly, "Husband, let's go home. I met you outside because I was afraid I couldn't control myself at home. I've been tormenting you for a year, and you haven't had enough." The wife shook her head with tears in her eyes, and they both couldn't help but smile. Chapter 13: The Last Night. After the two finished their meal, Zhongliang bluntly proposed, "Let's get a divorce. You can make your own plans as soon as possible. I can't live without that woman. It really won't take a few years for me to torment myself to death." The wife looked at Zhongliang with tears in her eyes, and couldn't help but sigh with tears in her eyes. "I had expected this day to come, and I thought I had prepared myself mentally. But I didn't expect that I would be so reluctant to let you go when this day came. If you could stay healthy, I would be willing to let you suffer for the rest of your life." Zhongliang's eyes were red, and he was very reluctant to leave at this moment. After all, the amount of exercise in 2 years of marriage is almost as much as some people's lifetime, and the relationship is not ordinary. But now, he can only helplessly comfort his wife. "After I was injured that time, I had a close call and survived. But our fate has ended. God's arrangement is the best. We all have to look forward, seize the next fate, and live a happy life." The wife suddenly complained sadly, "I don't care, I can still choose someone I like. But why is it so unfair to you that you arrange a 40-year-old lady for you and don't even give you the chance to choose?" Zhongliang smiled and explained, "Although Dr. Shen is older than me, he is excellent in all aspects. I am not at a disadvantage. Besides, he is just helping me treat my illness and has not agreed to do anything with me." "It's too early for you to say that." Their wife asked expectantly, "Are there other women besides her who can help you?" "I haven't encountered it yet." Zhongliang shook his head with an indifferent expression. It was enough for him to have Shen Caiyue, and he didn't want to get help from other women. That old lady really got a great bargain. Looking at his wife's indignant expression, Zhongliang told her seriously, "If you have the opportunity to see Dr. Shen, you will not say that. Because she can help you recover, you are fascinated by her, so you think everything about her is good, right? If you say so, then so be it. Zhongliang was too lazy to argue with his wife, so he urged her to go home and rest early. They made an appointment to go and complete the divorce procedures another day. After the two walked out of the noodle shop, their wife looked at Zhongliang carrying his suitcase and asked reluctantly, "Can't you go home and stay one more night? We are still husband and wife now." The guilt he felt towards his wife, coupled with the fact that Shen Caiyue was not around, caused his brain to secrete a large amount of dopamine uncontrollably, making Zhongliang unable to bear to refuse his wife's request. Carrying 2 suitcases, I reluctantly went home. Half an hour later, their wife, panting, nestled in Zhongliang's arms, reluctantly discussing, "Husband, how about we think about it again? Do we really want a divorce?" Zhongliang reminded his wife, "Didn't you always say before, let me find another woman? Sometimes I say those angry words when I'm not feeling well or in a bad mood. But most of the time, I still enjoy myself and I don't want to be separated from you. It is true that there are only cows that die of exhaustion, but no fields that are plowed to death. I am afraid that I will not be able to work for 2 years and will waste myself." "That's true. You look a lot thinner and haggard than when you first got married. It hurts me to see you like that. I hope that after being with that old lady, you can slowly recover and return to your healthy and sunny self." Zhongliang nodded, he hoped so. "By the way, let's get a divorce. How much money from the card should be given to you?" Their wife discussed it awkwardly. Although talking about money was a bit hurtful, it was a very realistic issue after all and had to be faced. The house was bought by the woman's family before the marriage, and Zhongliang was only responsible for buying furniture and appliances. But in the past 2 years, Zhongliang gave all his salary to his wife, and the more than 300,000 yuan in compensation he received for work-related injuries was also deposited into his wife's bank card. "I don't want a penny." Zhongliang always felt that he had let his wife down and should leave the house with nothing. "How can that be? It's not your fault that things have come to this, and you didn't want this to happen. I think you should at least be given compensation for your injuries. If I say no, then no, let's not argue about it." Zhongliang comforted his wife, then got up and put on his clothes. Their wife asked curiously, "Where are you going?" Zhongliang replied awkwardly, Go back to Dr. Shen's house." "Why are you in such a hurry? We haven't signed the divorce yet. Why are you in your own home? You seem to be sneaking around. Our marriage is still protected by the law, don't you know? Don't leave tonight. I finally rested for 2 days and I feel better. Who knows how many times I will have to toss and turn if I don't leave tonight. You don't want to sleep tonight?" Their wife hesitated for a moment, and the corners of her mouth could not help but rise. "I'm not afraid." Zhongliang joked helplessly, "The doctor said that I am strong on the outside but weak on the inside, and I am already in a terminal state. Don't you think that since he will not be your man in the future, you won't feel bad no matter how you use him?" Their wife smiled with shame, thinking that what Zhongliang said made sense. Pretending to be angry, she reluctantly said, "You're right, go back to your aunt's house and let her love you." Zhongliang had already put on his clothes and got out of bed, saying goodbye to his wife with a smile. Their wife put on a nightgown and went downstairs to see Zhongliang off. Zhongliang had just opened the door with his suitcase when his wife suddenly hugged him tightly from behind, unable to hold back her tears. She felt particularly uncomfortable when she thought that Zhongliang would no longer be her husband after he walked out of this door. Zhongliang looked back at his home and his wife, and couldn't help feeling sad and reluctant. He held his wife in his arms, wiped away her tears, and stroked her hair and cheeks. The two couldn't help but kiss one last time, but they couldn't stop the car. His wife was reluctant to let go, and Zhongliang, under the control of dopamine, began to get restless again. He simply closed the door and rushed into the bedroom with his wife in his arms. 20 minutes later, Zhongliang was in a dishevel. Their whole person came out of the bedroom, and his wife followed closely behind him. Zhongliang picked up the suitcase and walked out, turning back to advise, "No need to see me off, you should go to bed early." His wife still stopped him at the door and comforted him with a smile, "Don't worry. I don't want it anymore. I'm almost tiring you to death." Then he helped Zhongliang straighten his collar, buttoned his shirt, and said, "Let's go, husband." Both of them could not hide their sadness. Zhongliang forced a smile at his wife, turned around and walked down the stairs. His wife watched him leave, and when he turned around the corner of the stairs, his wife's tears fell again, and she waved goodbye reluctantly. Zhongliang's eyes also turned red. He stopped and moved his lips slightly. Go back quickly. The voice was choked in his throat and even he couldn't hear it clearly. Then, holding back tears, he turned around and continued to leave. The wife leaned against the door frame and closed the door only after she could no longer hear Zhongliang's footsteps. Chapter 14 Eating Longevity Noodles. Zhongliang came to Shen Caiyue's house carrying a suitcase. When Shen Caiyue opened the door and saw his look, she knew he was up to no good. Seriously admonished, you must be careful in the future. Wait until your body is in good condition before you think about that kind of thing. Then he took out a key and handed it to Zhongliang. This is the key to the house, take it. Have you eaten? Zhongliang took the key and nodded. I've eaten. He looked like he had done something wrong, but he also knew that in his current physical condition, he shouldn't give himself the opportunity to indulge himself. You look so weak, go take a shower and go back to your room to rest. Zhongliang first delivered the suitcase to the room, then took his daily necessities and went to the bathroom. After he turned off the shower, he was about to wash the clothes he had taken off. There was a sudden knock on the door, and Shen Caiyue asked, Are you done washing? Zhongliang quickly responded, Yes, I'm done. When you're done washing, come out first. Zhongliang thought she was in a hurry to use the bathroom, so he quickly put on his pajamas and came out. Shen Caiyue walked into the bathroom, looked at Zhongliang standing at the door, and urged him, Go back to bed. What are you doing standing at the door? Zhongliang replied awkwardly, I haven't washed the clothes I took off yet. I'll wash you, you go back to your room and rest. No, I can wash it myself. You have the nerve to live in my house, why are you still shy about such a small matter? Go and get some rest. I feel bad when I see you looking so weak. Shen Caiyue blurted out the truth, and then quickly changed her words, because I'm a doctor, I feel uncomfortable when I see weak people not resting well. Thank you, Dr. Shen. Zhongliang didn't feel like arguing anymore, so he turned around and left silently. After he left, Shen Caiyue took a deep breath, reached out and touched her chest to calm her excited heart. Then she started to help Zhongliang wash his clothes, and the corners of her mouth couldn't help but rise. After a while, Shen Caiyue hung up the washed clothes. Seeing that the light in Zhongliang's room was off, but the door was still open, she walked gently to the door and looked inside. Zhongliang had fallen asleep. When he was tired and weak, as soon as he saw Shen Caiyue, the dopamine in his body returned to normal. After calming down, you will feel very sleepy, fall asleep quickly and have good sleep quality. This is the process of the body's automatic adjustment and repair. Shen Caiyue didn't know how to face this relationship between them, and she didn't dare to imagine how it would develop in the future. I can only take it one step at a time, hoping that he can recover soon and return to his original life. Let's end this ridiculous relationship between the two of us and just think of it as a dream. Shen Caiyue comforted herself silently, then turned around and walked back to her room helplessly. She couldn't sleep that night. Her originally peaceful and regular life was disrupted by the appearance of Zhongliang. She was left alone and unable to sleep, trapped in a complex emotion of sweetness and torment, expectation and worry. The next morning, Shen Caiyue got up early and made 2 bowls of hand-rolled noodles. Zhongliang saw the hand-rolled noodles served, topped with kidney bean and egg sauce. He said excitedly, I haven't eaten this kind of hand-rolled noodles for a long time. My mother used to make it often. Nowadays, people are too lazy to bother, so it's more convenient to buy it in the supermarket. I find it troublesome, so I only make it on special days. Come and eat. Shen Caiyue lowered her head and started eating noodles. Zhongliang was silent for a moment and began to analyze Shen Caiyue's words. What is a special day? When he was a child and it was his birthday, his mother would specially make him hand-rolled noodles, also known as longevity noodles. Is it your birthday today? Shen Caiyue didn't answer, but casually said, You are quite smart. You understand it immediately. Then tell him, I wanted you not to come to my house tonight because it's the weekend and my daughter has to go home. But she called yesterday and said she was going to her classmate's house and would not be home this week. You didn't tell her it was your birthday today. It's not a big deal, just eat a bowl of noodles by yourself, I don't want to disturb her plans. Shen Caiyue looked nonchalant. Zhongliang invited excitedly, I'll take you out for dinner tonight. I don't like eating out. I'll come back early and make a few more dishes. You can just come back after get off work and eat. Shen Caiyue couldn't hide her excitement. She was overjoyed to have the person she loved celebrate her birthday with her. Zhongliang saw that Shen Caiyue also had a crush on him, and felt that he might have a chance, so he announced directly, "I discussed it with my partner yesterday, and we will go through the divorce procedures in the next 2 days." "What do you mean? Why are you doing this?" Shen Caiyue was surprised. She was so happy just now, but now she was suddenly hit by reality, as if she was the third party. Zhongliang quickly explained, "We have already discussed it. We have been exhausted physically and mentally in the past year. If we continue to live together, you know my situation. Sooner or later, something bad will happen. What's more, she has already planned for her future, and I don't want to delay her from building a happy family." Shen Caiyue nodded in agreement, but she still felt a little uncomfortable in her heart, as if this matter had something to do with her. Zhongliang struck while the iron was hot and emphasized, "Dr. Shen, in fact, I can't live with anyone except you." Shen Caiyue shyly advised, "That's not necessarily the case. Maybe you can return to normal in the future, or meet other women who can help you calm down." "No, you are enough for me." After hearing Zhongliang's naked confession, Shen Caiyue was very excited and nervous, and didn't know how to respond for a while. The age difference between them made her a little worried. "Let's talk about it after a while. You should take care of your body first." Shen Caiyue. Although she did not agree, she did not refuse either, which gave Zhongliang hope. "Okay, I'll follow your arrangements." Shen Caiyue looked up at Zhongliang and couldn't help but smile. The best birthday gift she has ever received is that Zhongliang can be single again. Now she can seriously and boldly consider their relationship. Although there is a big age gap, at least there are no moral concerns. Both of them have been divorced, and it is good to be a couple who got married later in life and spend the rest of their lives together. But she was still a little worried and didn't dare to invest too deeply in her feelings. After all, Zhongliang was helpless now and wanted to live healthily, so he had no other choice but to stay with her. It's hard to say what will happen in the future, and the two have only known each other for a short time, so they need to get to know each other better. After they finished their meal, they went to work separately. Zhongliang received a call from his wife in the morning, and the two agreed to meet at the Civil Affairs Bureau. Chapter 15: Surprises and Accidents. Zhongliang and his wife came out of the Civil Affairs Bureau and waited a month to get the divorce certificate. Zhongliang accidentally saw that the man who had dinner with his wife that day was waiting in a car on the side of the road. "He's quite anxious, isn't he? How long have you known each other?" The wife confessed generously, "We are old classmates. I met him earlier than you. If I hadn't met you later, I would have been with him a long time ago. So it turns out that I was defeated by him." Zhongliang smiled and teased, then sighed, "If it is destined to happen, it will happen. If it is not destined to happen, don't force it. You will eventually get married with him." His wife looked at Zhongliang and her eyes became red again. Zhongliang quickly comforted her, "Your true love is watching. Let's not make it too sentimental. Let's part ways in peace. Looking back on this marriage, I have no regrets and no complaints towards my partner. Even if we didn't grow old together, it was still a wonderful journey of life. It's just that we are on different paths now. Thank you for walking with me for that period of time. May your future journey be smoother and may you encounter only beauty and kindness." The wife couldn't keep calm after all. She threw herself into Zhongliang's arms and began to sob. Zhongliang looked at the man in the car and smiled in a friendly and ashamed manner. The man was too embarrassed to look him in the eye and dodged awkwardly. After a while, his wife left Zhongliang's shoulder and her emotions calmed down a little. "Don't torture that person anymore. I'm leaving first. Bye." Zhongliang waved his hand and turned away. His wife watched him walk a distance away, then turned and walked towards the car on the side of the road. The man quickly got out of the car to greet her, and the handover was finally completed smoothly. Shen Caiyue was busy in the kitchen and had almost finished preparing everything when she suddenly heard a knock on the door. "You're back so early. Didn't I give you the key?" Shen Caiyue muttered all the way to open the door. After opening the door, her view was blocked by a large bunch of flowers. The faces of the daughter and ex-husband appeared from both sides of the flowers, smiling and shouting, "Happy birthday." "Surprise. Didn't you say you were going to play at a classmate's house? So it's a surprise. I lied to you on purpose. How could I forget my mother's birthday? Come in quickly." Why did you buy so many flowers? Where should we put them? Shen Caiyue invited the two into their house, her face full of surprise and confusion. Her daughter's sudden appearance was enough to surprise her. She was totally surprised that her ex-husband also came. The ex-husband is Han Bing, who is 3 years older than Shen Caiyue and is 45 years old this year. He is tall and well-proportioned, and although he is not particularly handsome, he has good conversation and temperament, and can be considered a good-looking person. He is also the chairman of a listed company. He can be considered a very dazzling and successful person, and is always surrounded by various beauties. He had too many social events outside, and some things were unavoidable. He couldn't control his body, but he only had Shen Caiyue in his heart. 7 years ago, Han Bing was rumored to be dating a female star, and he himself did not deny it. Shen Caiyue did not quarrel with him, but chose to divorce quietly and give up her position as their hostess. Han Bing was bewitched by the female star and agreed to divorce on impulse, giving Shen Caiyue a large sum of money and several properties. The house Shen Caiyue lives in now was bought with money she pooled with Han Bing when they got married. At that time, Han Bing was still an ordinary civil servant, and his financial conditions were okay, but not very rich. Shen Caiyue was used to living here. Han Bing gave her several properties, including a villa. But it had been vacant all along and she had never lived there. She and Han Bing broke up peacefully, and they would occasionally see each other because of their daughter, and they were always polite to each other. After Han Bing divorced Shen Caiyue, he was with the female star for more than a year, but after the sweet period, they often quarreled and argued. After breaking up with the female star, he began to miss Shen Caiyue again, but Shen Caiyue did not agree to remarry him. He was too embarrassed to force it, but he had been secretly observing Shen Caiyue's life and never gave up the idea of remarrying. He had lived a carefree life these years, with no shortage of women around him, but he had never been serious. After Han Bing and her daughter entered the house, they found a place to put the flowers and cake. Shen Caiyue returned to the kitchen and started to get nervous, worrying about how to introduce Zhongliang when he came back. Han Bing and her daughter came to the kitchen door, ready to go in to help. The daughter looked into the kitchen and turned to complain to her father, "Mom didn't fall for it at all. She knew we were coming back. Look at the dishes she prepared long ago." Han Bing smiled and nodded, thinking that Shen Caiyue prepared it for them. Shen Caiyue didn't want to embarrass everyone later, so she decided not to let Zhongliang come back. She walked out of the kitchen and wanted to call Zhongliang, but the more anxious she was, the more she couldn't remember where she put her phone. The daughter followed behind Shen Caiyue and asked curiously, "Mom, what are you looking for?" "I forgot where I put my phone." Shen Caiyue didn't even raise her head and continued searching around the sofa. Han Bing stood by the dining table, picked up Shen Caiyue's phone from it, and reminded with a smile, "Your phone is here." Just as Shen Caiyue was about to go over to get it, she suddenly heard the sound of a door opening. Her heart skipped a beat, and she couldn't help but mutter to herself, "It's over, he's back." Zhongliang entered the room with a bouquet of flowers in his hand, looking at Shen Caiyue and her daughter sitting beside the sofa, and Han Bing sitting beside the dining table. The four of them were stunned with surprised expressions, and then they all looked at Shen Caiyue at the same time. Shen Caiyue had no choice but to walk up to Zhongliang and awkwardly introduce them to him. "This is my daughter Han Shui and my ex-husband Han Bing. They came to celebrate my birthday without notifying me and wanted to give me a surprise." Zhongliang was stunned for a few seconds, then uttered 4 words, "Hello, hello. Hello." Han Shui forced an awkward smile and greeted Zhongliang. Han Bing didn't say anything, but smiled expressionlessly. Nod slightly. Both father and daughter were waiting for Shen Caiyue to give them a reasonable explanation. Shen Caiyue nervously said, "His name is Zhongliang, and he is a patient of mine." This sentence made the other 3 people not know how to respond. Zhongliang was already considering whether to find an excuse to leave. Han Shui saw that her mother was in a difficult situation, so she stepped forward to help her out. "Mom, you and this uncle met because he went to the clinic to see a doctor, and then you became friends. He came here specially to celebrate your birthday with you today, right?" Shen Caiyue nodded quickly, turned around and glared at Zhongliang, and whispered, "Why did you buy flowers?" Zhongliang didn't say anything and looked at a loss. He and Shen Caiyue were very nervous. Han Shui held her mother's arm and whispered in her ear, "I'm in high school now, I can understand everything. You've been single for several years, it's normal for you to meet a friend of the opposite sex. What's more, he's quite handsome, he's a good match for you. After getting the support of her daughter, Shen Caiyue finally relented. As for what her ex-husband thought, he didn't care. Put your food down now. We'll be eating soon. Shen Caiyue told Zhongliang and walked to the kitchen side by side with her daughter. Chapter 17, Gaining the Support of My Daughter. The driver drove out of the community, and Zhongliang sat side by side with Han Bing in the back. It was the first time for him to ride in such a luxury car, which was indeed a world of difference from the van he usually drove in the company. Mr. Han, what kind of business are you in? Your company must be very large. Zhongliang couldn't help but be curious. Han Bing had been observing and analyzing Zhongliang since the meal, and through his words and actions, he tried to guess why he wanted to get close to Shen Caiyue. Han Bing was worried that he was going for Shen Caiyue's money. Now it seems that he really knew nothing about Shen Caiyue's past. When Shen Caiyue divorced Han Bing, the property Han Bing left her was conservatively estimated to be over 100 million. It's just that Shen Caiyue is a low-key person. She has been working in a clinic and leading an ordinary working-class life. She is very satisfied with this simple and regular life. This is also what Han Bing admires most about Shen Caiyue. He has always wanted to remarry this woman. I am tired of the life of extravagance and decadence. Looking back, the days with Shen Caiyue were the happiest. If Han Bing had not gone into business and become a top billionaire in just a few years, causing him to lose his way in lifestyle, their marriage would not have ended. Han Bing smiled and said the name of his company. Zhongliang immediately understood who he was. The richest man in the city and the chairman of a listed company. Zhongliang was surprised by this identity. He was speechless for a moment and didn't know how to continue the conversation. Looking at Zhongliang's puzzled expression, Han Bing invited him in a friendly manner. You are Shen Caiyue's friend, which means you are my friend. If you are interested, come to work in my company. I have no plans to change jobs for the time being. Thank you for your kindness. Zhongliang declined politely. Did he doubt that Han Bing was really so generous? She was his ex-wife. And it was obvious that he cared about Shen Caiyue very much. How could he not be jealous at all? Okay then. If you change your mind, you can always contact me. Han Bing took out a business card and handed it to Zhongliang. He really didn't want to help Zhongliang. He just wanted to keep Zhongliang within his control so that he could be monitored and guarded more easily. Although he didn't want to force Shen Caiyue to remarry, nor did he intend to hinder Shen Caiyue's remarriage. But the moment he saw Zhongliang walk into Shen Caiyue's house, he changed his mind. He couldn't accept that another man possessed Shen Caiyue, and he wanted to take back the woman who originally belonged to him. When Han Shui was washing up in the bathroom, she noticed something strange inside. There was an extra set of toiletries and a pair of men's slippers, which made her suspicious. I couldn't help but exclaim, Mom is actually living with that man. She walked out of the bathroom, and while her mother was still busy in the kitchen, she quickly went to her mother's room, and after a careful inspection, she found no changes. Then he checked other rooms and found out that Zhongliang lived there. Standing in Zhongliang's room, Han Shui couldn't help but wonder, they are all adults, why do they have to live separately if they are already living together? Just when she was at a loss for words, Shen Caiyue appeared behind her. Knowing that he could no longer conceal it, he confessed with shame, he does live here. I rented this room to him. Han Shui couldn't help but tease, what kind of plot are you guys playing out? Is it the old routine of a handsome young guy and a mature and beautiful landlord? Look at what you said, it's not what you thought. Shen Caiyue nervously held her daughter's hand, but she couldn't explain Zhongliang's situation to her daughter. You don't have to hide it like this. If you like each other, just be together openly. No one has the right to oppose you. Anyway, I support any decision you make. Shen Caiyue felt very touched by her daughter's support, and a stone in her heart finally fell to the ground. Tell me, how far have you developed? Why do you want to live separately when you are already living together? The daughter held her mother's arm and continued to question her. Shen Caiyue took her daughter out of the room, sat down on the sofa, and answered frankly, we have a good impression of each other, but we haven't confirmed our relationship yet. I want to spend more time with him before deciding whether to take the next step. He lives here, and facing a beauty like you, he can actually sleep peacefully. Is there something wrong with his body? What nonsense! Shen Caiyue blamed her daughter, but she couldn't help but smile because she was half right. Zhongliang was indeed abnormal. He just said he lived outside. Was he lying? Faced with her daughter's guess, Shen Caiyue had no choice but to nod. Then call him back quickly. Are you going to let him spend the night on the street? He's a big enough man to find a place to live. We don't have to worry about him. Because her daughter was at home, Shen Caiyue was embarrassed to call Zhongliang back home. Let him come back and live here. Does he think I'm in the way? What nonsense! He comes back to sleep in his own room. It doesn't bother anyone. The daughter looked at her mother's nervous expression and advised earnestly, call him back quickly. I can see that you are worried about him. Shen Caiyue glared at her daughter but did not refute. She was indeed worried about Zhongliang. I'll get you your phone. The daughter stood up and ran to the dining table to get her mother's cell phone. At this time, Zhongliang was already standing at the gate of the original community, and Han Bing's luxury car had already left. He was standing on the side of the road, hesitating about what to do. The cell phone rang and it was Shen Caiyue calling. Where are you? It's so late, come back soon. Forget it. It's not convenient for your daughter to stay at home. I can just find a hotel to stay for one night. When Shen Caiyue heard that Zhongliang was going to stay in a hotel, she asked with concern, can you sleep without me? You should come back. I talked to the child and she doesn't mind. Zhongliang was also afraid of the feeling of being controlled by lust and unable to sleep. I've gotten used to sleeping soundly at Shen Caiyue's house until dawn. After Shen Caiyue hung up the phone, her daughter couldn't help but imitate what she had just said, can you sleep without me? Then he laughed and teased, you two have come this far, and you haven't confirmed your relationship. Who would believe that? Are you living separately just to show me? Shen Caiyue quickly explained, it's not what you think, he has a special disease. If he can't see me at night, he can't sleep peacefully. Okay. It sounds a bit corny to me. The daughter interrupted Shen Caiyue's explanation and couldn't help but blame her. Are you insulting the intelligence of a high school student like me? You said something so weird, and there is also a disease. I'm surprised you thought of it. Do you think I'm a 3-year-old child? Shen Caiyue was amused by her daughter's words. She shook her head helplessly. She didn't know how to explain and simply gave up resisting. The daughter continued her analysis in a serious tone, that's not a disease, and it has nothing to do with medicine. That's called love. When a man falls in love with a woman, he will develop an emotional dependence on her. Not being able to sleep is the least of the problems, and some people will leave their partner and even die. Okay, stop talking. Shen Caiyue interrupted her daughter and urged her to go back to her room and sleep. The daughter said to her mother in a weird way, no, you have to go to my room with me. I can't sleep without you by my side. Are you done yet? I'll put you to sleep tonight, okay? Shen Caiyue knew her daughter was implying something, so she walked into the room with her daughter with a smile on her face. Chapter 18. 2 more people left. Zhongliang returned to Shen Caiyue's home. Shen Caiyue heard the door open in her daughter's room and turned to look outside. The daughter smiled and reminded, go and coax your little boyfriend to sleep. Don't talk nonsense. Go to sleep. Shen Caiyue glared at her daughter and left the room with a smile. Zhongliang stood in the living room, looking at Shen Caiyue coming to him, and asked in a low voice, your daughter is asleep. No, you don't have to be so cautious. She has no problem with you living here. Shen Caiyue comforted him and asked again, you're already at the door, why don't you go up to take a look? The divorce has already been signed, why are you going back? So soon? Shen Caiyue was a little surprised. She called me this morning and she has her own plans. She needs to complete the formalities as soon as possible so that she can take the next step. Shen Caiyue nodded and asked expectantly, what are your plans for the next step? Zhongliang smiled and replied helplessly, I have no other choice but to bother you. Maybe in the future, when you recover, you will be back to normal. Then you will have other options and you don't have to stay with me. Dr. Shen, even if I recover from my illness, I still want to be with you forever. I love you. Facing Zhongliang's confession, Shen Caiyue nervously reminded him, there is a big age gap between us, do you think it's appropriate? I don't think age is a problem, the feeling towards each other is what matters most. Zhongliang was very firm in his attitude, and then he expressed his concerns, I didn't expect that your ex-husband is the chairman of a listed company. Compared with such a successful person, I am an air conditioner installer, and I am indeed out of your league. It's normal if you don't like me. Do you think I am someone who cares about wealth and status? Shen Caiyue questioned seriously, looking into Zhongliang's eyes, not wanting him to retreat out of inferiority. Of course not. You don't seem like someone who cares about material things. I think it's enough to have enough money, and I don't lack money. What I lack is someone who has feelings for me and is by my side. Zhongliang seemed to be able to see from Shen Caiyue's eyes the grievances and loneliness she had experienced over the years, and he couldn't help but want to hug her. Shen Caiyue's breathing was rapid. She was eager and nervous. But she still had some concerns. She turned her head carefully and looked at the door of her daughter's room. Zhongliang also felt like a thief and felt a little guilty. He raised his arm, paused in the air for a few seconds, and then put it down obediently. Shen Caiyue glanced at Zhongliang's nervous expression and reminded him with a smile, "Take care of your body first, then think about the future." Zhongliang nodded in shame, and then the two smiled at each other and went back to their rooms. The next day, the three of them had breakfast together. Zhongliang and Shen Caiyue both lowered their heads while eating, too shy to say a word, and even tried to avoid eye contact. Han Shui kept looking at them and couldn't help but praise, "You two look quite a good match. Hurry and eat." Shen Caiyue didn't want to talk about herself and Zhongliang in front of her daughter. Zhongliang was very happy to receive the affirmation from Shen Caiyue's daughter. He smiled and nodded, "Thank you." Han Shui warned without disguising, "You'd better really like my mother. If you just covet her beauty and don't know how to cherish her after you get her, my father will not let you go." "How can you talk like that? Your father doesn't have to worry about my affairs." Shen Caiyue severely criticized her daughter, thinking that her words were too impolite. "Although my dad is divorced from you, he still cares about you very much. You still say that." Shen Caiyue put down her chopsticks and looked at her daughter angrily. Zhongliang quickly comforted her, "Your daughter is right. I can see that your ex-husband still cares about you. I don't think this is a bad thing." Han Shui asked excitedly, "You are quite generous, aren't you jealous? I wish everyone cared about Dr. Shen. As long as it's for her good, I won't be jealous." Zhongliang smiled at Shen Caiyue, and the two of them couldn't help but look at each other, their eyes inadvertently filled with ambiguity. "All right. Be more restrained in front of me," Han Shui shouted, and Zhongliang quickly lowered his head to eat. Shen Caiyue glared at her daughter, but she didn't feel like saying anything. She smiled and continued eating. Han Bing sat in his office, feeling uneasy all morning, and the more he thought about it, the more worried he became. Finally, he couldn't help but arrange two people to find out Zhongliang's background and monitor his whereabouts. Shen Caiyue's daughter returned to school, and she and Zhongliang were the only ones left for dinner in the evening. The house suddenly became quiet and both of them felt a little embarrassed. Although Shen Caiyue had a crush on Zhongliang, she had never intended to develop a romantic relationship with him. Now that she knew Zhongliang was divorced and was also interested in her, she could not help but be tempted and yearn for the beauty of romance. "Dr. Shen, your daughter seems to be quite supportive of us being together, right?" Zhongliang was the first to break the silence and looked bravely into Shen Caiyue's eyes. Shen Caiyue glanced at him and said, "Take care of your health first, and then consider our relationship. I feel much better now than before. I can eat well, sleep well, and work more energetically during the day. You look better now, but you've overdrawn your energy in the past. You'd better rest for a few months. Does it take that long to abstain from sex?" Zhongliang obviously couldn't wait that long. Shen Caiyue looked at him for a few times and reminded him, "At least you have to get back to a normal weight. You're still a little thin now." "That's easy. Since I moved into your house, I've been eating well and sleeping well, and I've gained a lot of weight." "That's good. For a man of your height, it would be more appropriate for him to gain at least 10 pounds. Yes, I will complete the task." Zhongliang assured confidently and began to eat with big mouthfuls. Shen Caiyue smiled and reminded, "Don't get too fat, I don't like bloated men." "Don't worry. I will control my weight and make sure you are satisfied. It's mainly for your health." As they ate and talked, Shen Caiyue couldn't help but raise the corners of her mouth. After Shen Caiyue finished cleaning up and came out of the kitchen, she saw Zhongliang waiting for her outside. Curiously asked, "Why are you standing here instead of going back to your room to sleep?" Zhongliang replied with a smile, "Waiting for you." Shen Caiyue's cheeks instantly turned hot, and she was also very eager and looking forward to it. But I still tried to ask calmly, "Don't you think it's too fast? What are you doing so fast? It's still early. I want to watch TV and chat with you. Shen Caiyue went from being excited and nervous to feeling embarrassed. It turned out that she was thinking too much. Look for yourself. I want to rest early. Shen Caiyue walked towards her room after she finished speaking. Zhongliang realized her question and guessed, "Did you think I was waiting for you to sleep with me? You said it was a bit too fast, but you didn't refuse, right?" Shen Caiyue turned around and glared at Zhongliang, without saying anything or stopping, and continued walking back to the room. Zhongliang did not give up and followed her closely. She walked into the room and turned around to lock Zhongliang out. Zhongliang held the door with his hand, and Shen Caiyue asked seriously, "Do you still want to break into my room? I'm very energetic now, not sleepy at all. I just want to talk to you. Can you fall asleep so early?" Shen Caiyue looked at Zhongliang's sincere eyes and believed that he would not do anything rash. "Come in after I change my clothes." Shen Caiyue said something and gently closed the door. Chapter 19, Asking for a Hug. After Shen Caiyue closed the door, she couldn't help but feel her heart beating faster. Since her divorce, no man had ever entered her room. She changed into her usual suspender nightgown. The silvery white silky fabric made her curvy body curves even more charming. The exposed shoulders and arms have even bones and beautiful lines, and the smooth and delicate skin is full of temptation. The hem of her skirt was above her knees, unable to hide her long, straight legs. She looked down and felt as if she was deliberately seducing men. Normally, she would dress like this at home and she didn't think there was anything wrong with it. But now that there was a man at home, she felt that it was a bit too revealing. The door of the room was finally opened. Shen Caiyue was wearing pajamas and wrapped herself tightly. But her body curves were still beautiful. Zhongliang wanted to ask, "Does it take you so long to change your clothes?" But he didn't dare to say it out loud. He walked into the room and couldn't help looking around. He was very excited. There seemed to be a special smell in the room. He couldn't put his finger on it. Maybe it was the seductive hormones of the opposite sex at work. "What are you looking at?" Shen Caiyue asked, then went to bed and leaned against the headboard. "Just take a look around." Zhongliang was full of curiosity about Shen Caiyue's room. He found the sexy and silky nightgown on the hanger and remembered seeing Shen Caiyue wearing it. "Why aren't you wearing this nightgown?" Zhongliang moved a chair and sat down beside the bed. Shen Caiyue smiled and replied, "I wear whatever I like. Now is the time for you to recuperate, so it's best not to have any random thoughts. No matter how many clothes you wear, it won't stop me from daydreaming. You dare." Shen Caiyue glared at Zhongliang, and the corners of her mouth couldn't help but rise. "Don't worry, I'm just thinking about it. I can control my behavior and it won't affect my sleep and recuperation." Hearing Zhongliang's straightforward words, Shen Caiyue's face turned red. Staring at his face, she felt a wave of heat. Zhongliang saw that Shen Caiyue was also very excited, so he bravely held her hand and asked, "Dr. Shen, do you believe in love at first sight?" Shen Caiyue took a deep breath, her chest rising and falling rapidly. She did not dodge, but also held Zhongliang's hand tightly, feeling each other's warmth and desire. After hesitating for a moment, she confessed frankly, "I didn't believe it before I met you. Until that day when you walked into the clinic, pulled down your pants in front of me, and exposed half of your buttocks. The first time I was treating a patient, I couldn't help but have wild thoughts." When Shen Caiyue said this, she couldn't help but laugh out loud shyly. Zhongliang stared at Shen Caiyue with a half smile, and when she stopped laughing, he told her seriously, "I was attracted by your eyes. You were wearing a mask that day, and I could only see your eyes. I was fascinated by you at first sight, and my brain immediately stopped secreting dopamine, and was no longer controlled by those carnal desires. At that time, I guessed that this must be love at first sight, and I met the right person. This kind of fate is hard to come by, and many people never have the chance to meet it in their entire lives." Shen Caiyue smiled and teased, "Hearing what you said, it seems that my feelings towards you are too superficial. I don't mind that you have feelings for me because of my butt. In essence, the butt and eyes are both parts of the body. There is no emotional difference between liking someone's eyes and liking someone's butt, and there is no difference in level." Shen Caiyue gently stroked Zhongliang's cheek and comforted him gently, "Actually, I like your eyes very much, too." Then I couldn't help laughing again. Looking at Shen Caiyue's brilliant smile, revealing her white and neat teeth and her pink and plump lips, one can't help but imagine. He Zhongliang moved his chair, moved closer to Shen Caiyue, and put his hand on her shoulder. Shen Caiyue suddenly put away her smile and asked seriously, "What do you want to do by getting so close?" He Zhongliang excitedly confessed, "I want to hug you." The two of them were face to face at close range and could feel each other's rapid breathing. Shen Caiyue put her hand on He Zhongliang's shoulder, but her body was limp and her arms had no strength at all. If He Zhongliang insisted on getting closer, she would be powerless to resist. But I still tried to discuss it calmly. "I don't want to develop so quickly, you should rest for 3 or 2 months before we talk. I just want to hug you. Give me a hug before going to bed. I'll go back to my room and sleep right away." Shen Caiyue felt that she had been fooled again, or that she was thinking too much. Maybe the time had really come, and she couldn't help but long to bloom. She patted He Zhongliang's shoulder gently and raised her arm. "I'll give you a hug, go back to sleep." He Zhongliang held her in his arms, lifted her hair, and took a deep breath. "Okay, go back and rest." Shen Caiyue urged and gently pushed He Zhongliang, but he still held on and refused to let go. "Didn't you say I'd just give you a hug and then go back to sleep? I didn't say how long I would hold you for. You are playing tricks on me." Shen Caiyue blamed him, but then couldn't help but smile. She pushed He Zhongliang's shoulders lightly a few times and stopped resisting. She sighed and gently stroked his shoulder. At this moment, Shen Caiyue officially took over this little boyfriend and decided to love him well in the future. Nearly 10 minutes later, Shen Caiyue patted He Zhongliang on the back and urged him, "Have you hugged me enough? I'm sleepy. Go back to sleep." He Zhongliang then reluctantly let her go and said mischievously, "I'll hug you again tomorrow night." Then he stood up suddenly, but he forgot his body's instinctive reaction. He quickly bent down, turned around awkwardly and walked out of the room quickly. Shen Caiyue noticed his body's reaction the moment he stood up. Watching him run away in disgrace, I couldn't help but tremble in my throat. I complained helplessly. "You are really obedient. In fact, as long as you don't overdo it, it's okay occasionally." Shen Caiyue sighed, couldn't help but blush, and grabbed a corner of the quilt tightly. Then he pulled up the quilt to cover his face, hiding the smile that could not help but show. The next morning, the people Han Bing sent to investigate He Zhongliang came to report to him about He Zhongliang's work unit, his previous marital status, and the fact that he is currently living with Shen Caiyue. After hearing this, Han Bing couldn't believe his ears and asked seriously, "Have you figured out whether he is really living with Shen Caiyue? We followed him after he got off work. He really went to Shen Caiyue's house." It wasn't until the next morning that the two of them came out of the house one after another. "We will continue to monitor him tonight." "No need. You guys get out." Han Bing sent the two men away, with a cold expression, looking thoughtfully at the floor-to-ceiling window behind him. A female secretary walked into the office and put a document in front of him for his signature. He picked up the pen, but because there was no ink after he scratched it, he instantly became furious, threw the pen against the wall, and then slammed the table twice. He suddenly stood up, turned around and approached the French window, looking outside fiercely. The female secretary quickly cleaned up the desk, prepared a pen, and waited nervously. Chapter 20, Going to the female client's home. At noon, Han Bing was sitting in a high-end restaurant with a woman. This woman's name is Xu Meng. She was also Han Bing's lover a few years ago, but later they gradually ended that relationship. With Han Bing's help, he runs a KTV and has close ties with gangsters. He also has a few regular thugs in his own store. This woman not only has a beautiful appearance, but also has intelligence and means that are appreciated by Han Bing. She is the most capable one among his many lovers. Although the two have ended that kind of relationship, they still keep in touch frequently. Han Bing has some shady things that need her help to solve, and of course he will not treat her badly afterwards. This time, he planned to let her handle the matter of dealing with He Zhongliang. But Han Bing was worried that if he was too harsh, Shen Caiyue might suspect him, and he didn't know how to face that woman in the future. Moreover, his daughter would also stand on Shen Caiyue's side. His daughter and Shen Caiyue were the people he cared about the most, and he dared not offend them. After Han Bing explained the situation to Xu Meng suggested, "Since there is no deep hatred, and there is no conflict of interests involved, there is no need to be ruthless. As long as we can find a way to stop him from getting close to your ex-wife, that will be enough." Han Bing was still a little hesitant, always feeling that He Zhongliang had slept with Shen Caiyue, which made him resentful. Although she was his ex-wife, he still couldn't accept it. I didn't expect that the pure-hearted Shen Caiyue would find a young man at home. He guessed that if they lived together, it was impossible for them not to have sex. One was full of energy, and the other was in his prime. Han Bing was furious when he thought of this. He wanted to arrange for someone to kill Zhongliang. Xu Meng saw Han Bing's worries and comforted him with a smile. It's a matter of mutual consent, so don't be so angry. I will find a way to make that young man leave your ex-wife on his own initiative. If you hurt him, he is not a gangster, he has no enemies. Your ex-wife will definitely suspect you, you care about her so much, you should not want her to hate you. Han Bing took a deep breath, sighed helplessly, and nodded silently, which was considered as showing mercy to Zhongliang. Then he asked curiously, how do you plan to make him leave Shen Caiyue on his own initiative? You know how I deal with men. He's a young man full of vigor and earns his money through hard work. What does he want from getting close to your ex-wife? He just wants to rely on his rich aunt and doesn't want to work hard anymore. Whether he wants to be a playboy or rich and powerful, I can satisfy him. I can seduce him and then dump him. He changed his mind, and your ex-wife can only blame herself for choosing the wrong person, not others. Han Bing analyzed uncertainly. He doesn't seem to know how much wealth Shen Caiyue has. He may not be going for the money. That's because they are after beauty. I've seen your ex-wife. Although she's 10 years older than me, I can't say I can beat her in terms of looks. Han Bing looked up at Xu Meng and commented with a smile, the styles are different, there is no comparison. Seeing how much you care about her, in your heart there must be no one prettier than her. Some feelings and emotions are hard to let go, and have little to do with appearance. I definitely have more ways to deal with men than she does. Don't worry. I will be able to take down that guy soon and will never let him get close to your ex-wife again. Xu Meng assured confidently. Han Bing was not satisfied and stressed, not as soon as possible. Starting from tonight, I don't want him to spend the night at Shen Caiyue's house again. Are you in such a hurry? I actually have something else to do this afternoon. Get this done first, I won't treat you unfairly. I know you are rich and generous. All right. I'll arrange it now. Xu Meng took out his cell phone and started calling people to make arrangements. Zhongliang received an assignment from the company in the afternoon to do dust removal and maintenance for an air conditioner for a customer. He drove the company's van to an upscale residential area and found the customer's home according to the address. After pressing the doorbell and waiting for a while, Xu Meng opened the door and greeted me with a smile. She was only wearing a white bathrobe with a ribbon tied around her waist. The collar of her upper body was very low, revealing her breasts. The slit of her lower body was also very high, and as she walked, her thighs were faintly visible. After Zhongliang entered the room, his brain began to secrete a large amount of dopamine under strong stimulation. He could only keep reciting Shen Caiyue's name in his heart to remind himself to calm down and not be impulsive. Under the guidance of Xu Meng, Zhongliang came to the air conditioner and began to quickly remove dust and maintain it. He tried to keep himself focused and not think about the hostess. But Xu Meng insisted on helping, and she kept wandering around Zhongliang, sometimes beating her chest and lowering her head, and sometimes deliberately half-crouching in front of Zhongliang. The bathrobe was completely exposed. Her smooth, white skin and her voluptuous and graceful figure were displayed in front of Zhongliang without reservation. Are you alone at home? Zhongliang hopes that there will be a man to help him out. Yes. I'm home alone. Do you have any other ideas? Xu Meng put her hands on Zhongliang's shoulders and stared at him with charming eyes. Zhongliang quickly explained, No, don't misunderstand me, I don't have that kind of thought. Xu Meng grabbed his arm and asked relentlessly, What kind of idea? Tell me clearly. I don't mean to disrespect you, just stay away. It's too dusty here. Just in time for us to take a bath together after we finish our work. Xu Meng's words made Zhongliang so excited that he was stunned. This was simply naked seduction, without any twists and turns. After adjusting for a moment, he persuaded awkwardly, No, I have other work to do. I will wash it when I get home from get off work. You'd better not stay here. I'm afraid of bumping into you. You think I'm getting in the way? Well, I'll go make you some juice. Xu Meng then let go of Zhongliang's arm and twisted her waist to leave. Zhongliang couldn't help but take a look at the girl under the white bathrobe. Plump, round buttocks. Then I quickly turned around and continued to work, just wanting to finish the work as soon as possible and leave here. 20 minutes later, Zhongliang completed all maintenance work, cleaned up the scene, and hurried out. He couldn't stay here for even a second and felt like he was about to explode. Seeing Zhongliang was about to leave in a hurry, Shumeng quickly chased after him with a glass of juice. Where are you going? Don't you need the client's signature? Yes. Zhongliang quickly took out the list and pen from the tool kit, walked up to Shumeng, and handed them to her with both hands. Why are you blushing? Are you hot? Shumeng held the juice in one hand and stroked Zhongliang's face with the other. Yes, it's a little hot. Please sign it quickly. I have other work to do and I'm a little anxious. Zhongliang stepped back slightly, extremely nervous. Shumeng knew men very well. It was obvious that the young man in front of him was already burning with desire, but why didn't he take the bait? Was he really that loyal to Shen Caiyue? Impossible. If it's a bargain that's right in front of you, who would not take the bait? Shumeng grumbled in her heart and felt unconvinced. With her looks and charm, she shouldn't have failed. Chapter 22 Complaints from Female Customers. At around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Zhongliang was packing up his tools in the van, preparing to go home. Suddenly, he received a call saying that a female customer complained to him that her air conditioner could not function properly after maintenance. He was asked to go to the customer's home immediately and apologize to the customer. Zhongliang knew that the woman was deliberately making trouble, but it was hard to defend himself against such a thing. The company leaders would definitely not listen to him, and the company did not want to offend customers. Zhongliang knew that it was useless to apologize, because he couldn't give the woman what she wanted. She would definitely deliberately make things difficult for him, and at most she would deduct some money, even if he lost his job. Zhongliang refused his leader's request and refused to apologize to the female customer. The leader had no choice but to criticize him and then arrange for someone else to handle it. Half an hour later, Shumeng heard the doorbell. She put on gorgeous makeup and wore a grey hip skirt, which fully showed off her plump figure. With a confident smile on her face, she twisted her graceful waist to open the door. The staff in front of him surprised him. He didn't expect that Zhongliang would not come and replace him with someone else to handle the matter. Hello, I am the after-sales staff assigned by the company. The man stared at Shumeng, his eyes flustered and busy, not knowing where to look first. Every part of her face and body made him salivate. He quickly put on his shoe covers and couldn't wait to get into their house. Seeing how excited Shumeng was, he should have taken the bait with just one look, but this was not the target person. I had no choice but to tell him angrily, you don't need to come in, the air conditioning has returned to normal. Let me check you in. The after-sales staff took a responsible attitude towards their work and also wanted to take a few more glances at this beautiful young woman. I said no, don't you understand? Shumeng directly turned away the after-sales staff. He turned around and angrily scolded, is that boy sick? Damn, is he still a man? She began to worry about how to explain to Hanbing that she had promised something with full confidence, but she didn't expect to fail. This result was something she had not expected. She had been dealing with men for more than 10 years, but this was the first time she had lost so thoroughly. In the evening, Zhongliang and Shen Caiyue bought groceries and went home together. The person in charge of surveillance downstairs at Shen Caiyue's house immediately called Hanbing to inform him. After hearing the news, Hanbing immediately called Shumeng to ask, what are you doing? Why did that boy go home with Shen Caiyue again? Shumeng explained ashamedly, I met him today and tried my best, but I didn't expect that guy didn't take the bait. Give me a few more days, and I will definitely help you deal with him. I'm going to have insomnia tonight. Do you want me to have insomnia for a few more nights? If you can't handle him tomorrow, just arrange for someone to get rid of him. No matter what method you use, make him disabled or disappear from the face of the earth. Anyway, I don't want to continue to have insomnia tomorrow night. Is it necessary for you to be so angry? Just find a way to make him leave Shen Caiyue. I don't think it's necessary to cause someone's death. Then you should ask him to leave Shen Caiyue. If you are not sure you can handle this matter, just tell me and I will arrange for someone else to do it right away. No, I will definitely help you with this tomorrow. You are my god of wealth and my great supporter, I will definitely satisfy you. I hope you won't let me down again tomorrow. Don't worry. I was careless today. He will definitely not be able to escape from my grasp tomorrow. What should you do if you can't sleep tonight? I'll go over and keep you company. Han Bing calmed down a little and said politely, no need to bother you. Xu Meng guessed very tactfully, I know you have no shortage of women around you, so it's not my turn to accompany you, right? Han Bing didn't answer, but just smiled and said perfunctorily, okay, I have another meeting. I won't talk to you anymore. After Xu Meng hung up the phone, her expression gradually became solemn. What if Zhongliang still doesn't cooperate tomorrow? There was no conflict of interest involved, nor any deep hatred. Xu Meng couldn't bear to let anyone attack him. It was such a pity for such a good guy. After so many years of struggling in society, she was tired of sweet talk and false feelings. She also wanted to find a reliable man, and she was only a few years older than Zhongliang, so she thought they were a good match. While having dinner in the evening, Zhongliang chatted with Shen Caiyue and mentioned that he had been complained about by a female customer today. Shen Caiyue casually guessed, is it the woman who seduced you during the day? Zhongliang nodded, and couldn't help sighing and feeling a little depressed. Shen Caiyue smiled and teased, don't be angry, she just loves you, so she turns love into hate. You can make friends with her first, and after getting to know her slowly, maybe you will like her. Are you jealous? I don't have any feelings for her. Who was the person who ran to the clinic at noon and said he was feeling uncomfortable? Zhongliang explained with a smile, that's not being moved, it's a physiological instinctive reaction, not controlled by the mind. Dr. Shen, you are professional medical staff, you should understand. I understand you, and I don't blame you. Shen Caiyue said indifferently, but she clearly cared. She was like other women, once she fell in love, she would become a little sensitive and childish. Zhongliang deliberately stared into Shen Caiyue's eyes, admiring her temper. Her shy and evasive expression, like that of a young girl, fascinated Zhongliang. After a moment of silence, Zhongliang seriously analyzed, that woman should not just have a crush on me, she must have some purpose. Her behavior was too much, and after failing to succeed, she even called the company and refused to give up. I've met some enthusiastic clients in the past, and at most they just said some ambiguous things. But she's not as crazy as me. I think this is not right. Shen Caiyue's expression also became serious, and she asked curiously, she looks. Isn't it normal to come here? To be honest, she has very good looks, with a pretty face and a beautiful figure. She lives in a high-end residential area, and her home is decorated luxuriously. Her manner of conversation and temperament are also extraordinary, and she doesn't look like a brainless woman who is obsessed with sex. This time, when Shen Caiyue heard Zhongliang praising that woman, she did not get jealous. She seriously guessed, you suspect someone has deliberately set a trap for you and wants to frame you. Theoretically it should be a trap, but to instruct a woman like that to seduce me, there must be a big shot behind it. But I'm a working-class person who earns hard-earned money. Let alone offending a big shot, I don't even have the chance to get to know him. After Zhongliang finished speaking, he was silent for a moment, and suddenly took out the business card that Han Bing gave him the day before from his pocket. If you want to talk about truly wealthy people, you know someone like your ex-husband. Zhongliang just said it as a joke. He couldn't imagine that the polite Han Bing would be such a cruel and ruthless character. But Shen Caiyue knew her ex-husband better. As his power and wealth continued to accumulate, he became more and more vicious. This is also one of the reasons why Shen Caiyue couldn't bear to live with him anymore. Although Shen Caiyue knew that Han Bing was forced to do some things because he was in that position, it was impossible for people who did big things to have clean hands. In order to fight for interests, it was impossible to have a good relationship with each other. When some people are successful, others are frustrated. When some people climb up, others fall down or even get trampled to death. But Shen Caiyue was just suspicious and didn't dare to be absolutely sure, so she didn't continue talking about this matter. I hope it's just a misunderstanding or a farce. Chapter 23 Receive Rewards. After dinner, Shen Caiyue came out of the kitchen and saw Zhongliang waiting for her at the door. What are you doing standing here? You want to talk to me again? Zhongliang nodded with an expectant smile on his face. I want to watch TV for a while, would you like to watch it with me? Of course I would. I have nothing to do anyway. The two walked to the sofa together and sat side by side. Shen Caiyue stared at the TV, and Zhongliang stared at Shen Caiyue's face. Shen Caiyue looked at him and reminded him with a smile, if you don't like watching this kind of family drama, you don't have to force yourself to accompany me here. Don't young people like to play games? I have no interest in online games. I don't understand how to play them, and I can't learn how to play them. Zhongliang moved his body and pressed himself against Shen Caiyue. One arm gently went around her waist and pressed against the sofa on the other side of her body, ready to hold her in his arms at any time. Shen Caiyue knew his intention and pretended to concentrate on watching TV and ignored him. Zhongliang cleared his throat and gently placed his arm against Shen Caiyue's body. Shen Caiyue snuggled into his arms, and both of them smiled without saying a word, hugging each other and nestling on the sofa. After a moment, Zhongliang lowered his head and stared at Shen Caiyue's face. Holding her in his arms like this and observing her face up close made Zhongliang very excited. I couldn't help but praise you. You are so naturally beautiful that you don't need any decoration. Even the crow's feet at the corners of your eyes are so natural and beautiful. You really know how to compliment people. Are you attracted by my crow's feet? Not entirely. There are also your eyes and nose. Zhongliang gently stroked Shen Caiyue's delicate face. Shen Caiyue no longer had the heart to stare at the TV. She closed her eyes and pressed her cheek against Zhongliang's chest, feeling the long-awaited sweetness. Staring at Shen Caiyue's moist and plump lips, Zhongliang reminded her excitedly, "You still owe me a reward during the day." Shen Caiyue didn't open her eyes, but nodded with a ruddy face. She admitted that she had promised to reward Zhongliang, raised her head slightly, and took a quick breath. Zhongliang gently lifted Shen Caiyue's chin and stroked her delicate, smooth, and graceful profile. His fingers couldn't help but gently touch her red lips, and for a moment he was reluctant to taste that flavor so soon. Shen Caiyue opened her eyes were blurry and filled with a hint of resentment, as if she was blaming the other person for being too slow. The two looked into each other's eyes and felt the affection and love in each other's eyes. Shen Caiyue had already let go of her reserve, her face was unusually ruddy at the moment, and her mouth felt dry. Her breathing became more and more rapid, and she finally couldn't help but extend her pink and slippery tongue tip and lick her lips lightly. She didn't mean to seduce Zhongliang, she was just feeling hot and uncomfortable, and it was just an unintentional instinctive reaction. But for Zhongliang, this silky glance was too tempting. He took a deep breath. Half an hour later, Shen Caiyue gently pushed Zhongliang away and buried her face in his arms. Panting shyly, she gently reproached, "Have you kissed enough? I'm tired, let me rest for a while." Zhongliang also took a deep breath and joked, "Just think of it as exercising your lung capacity, which is good for your health. Let's stop here for tonight. I'm thirsty. I'll get you some water." Zhongliang let go of the limp Shen Caiyue and trotted over to get a glass of water. Shen Caiyue drank half and left half for him. Zhongliang put the empty cup on the coffee table and continued to hold Shen Caiyue in his arms. He discussed with her face to face, "Our relationship has become closer, so let's strike while the iron is hot tonight. I don't know if you are willing, or not. Shen Caiyue stroked Zhongliang's face, raised her head and pecked the corner of his mouth, then smiled and shook her head. "Remind him, if I remember correctly, you haven't received the divorce certificate yet." Zhongliang quickly explained, "We have signed and negotiated everything, we are just waiting for the formalities. She should be planning the wedding now. After you get your divorce certificate, consider striking while the iron is hot." Shen Caiyue was firm in her attitude. Although she was also eager, she still insisted on waiting a few more days. "Okay, good things are worth waiting for." Zhongliang nodded in agreement, and then asked, "Is it necessary for us to sleep separately tonight?" "Of course we have to sleep separately. We will go back to our respective rooms to rest in a while. I'll just hold you while I sleep, and I promise I won't do anything wrong." "You can't help it." "I can." "I can't. Come on." Shen Caiyue's words made Zhongliang want to sleep with her even more. She saw what Zhongliang was thinking and confessed seriously, "If you must have me, I am powerless to resist and I won't blame you. But I hope I can wait until the day you get the divorce certificate, and then I will give myself completely to you. Are you willing to cooperate with me?" Zhongliang took a deep breath and assured excitedly, "I am willing. Even if you break into my room in the middle of the night, I will definitely die rather than obey you." Shen Caiyue laughed and teased, "I'm not the female client you met today, you think too much. She's not as good as you. No one can be like you. I can't let go of her." Zhongliang moved closer to Shen Caiyue's lips again. "Almost done, go back to the room and sleep." Shen Caiyue wanted to persuade Zhongliang to rest early, but she couldn't finish her words and stopped talking. She was reluctant to end this sweet taste. The next day, as soon as Zhongliang arrived at the company, he was called by his leader for a talk. She still insisted that he go and apologize to the female customer from yesterday in person, and she complained about him several times. The company leaders also felt that there was something fishy about this matter and suspected that the female customer was deliberately making things difficult for them. But they have no choice but to deal with customer complaints. I advised Zhongliang to bear with the injustice and go to the door to apologize. What loss can a young man suffer? Zhongliang was too lazy to explain in detail to the company leaders. He also wanted to ask them in person what the woman was trying to do. At around 9 o'clock in the morning, Zhongliang arrived at Xu Meng's house, took a deep breath and rang the doorbell. Xu Meng opened the door and saw Zhongliang. She smiled with satisfaction. This time she was dressed more casually, a blue skirt just above her knees, not too revealing. But she still shows off her advantages of a curvy figure. People with good figures are very attractive as long as they wear clothes that fit them well. Come in. Xu Meng invited politely, turning around and twisting her waist. Zhongliang really couldn't bear to see such a thin waist and plump buttocks, but he still went in. If he couldn't bear it anymore, he would just run out. Go find Dr. Shen and calm down. Sit down. Xu Meng took Zhongliang to a bar, which was filled with various foreign liquors and red wines. It seemed that she was a bit addicted to alcohol. After Zhongliang sat down, he said that he had to drive to work and could not drink. Xu Meng poured herself a glass of foreign wine and asked with concern, "Let me get you a bottle of drink." "I don't want to drink anything. I'm here to talk to you about something." "Why are you targeting me? Just say it straight." Xu Meng held a glass of wine and sat next to Zhongliang with her legs overlapping. The hem of the skirt was pulled above the knees, revealing the beautiful lines of the thighs again in front of Zhongliang. Zhongliang was able to control his behavior, but he couldn't hide his excited and nervous expression. Chapter 24, Being Instigated. Xu Meng took a sip of wine, shook the glass slowly, and stared at Zhongliang's excited and nervous expression. Even though he tried not to look directly at Xu Meng's body, his eyes still revealed his desire. Xu Meng couldn't help but be curious. "You obviously look very lustful, as if you can't wait to get me. But why do you try so hard to suppress your desires?" Zhongliang confessed directly, "If I say that I have a head injury and my brain always secretes excessive dopamine, and I can't control my impulses when I see the opposite sex, would you believe it?" Xu Meng blurted out, "Of course I don't believe it. Yesterday I took off all my clothes and you just turned around and ran away. Is that what you call losing control of your impulse?" "I can't control my physiological impulsive reactions, but I can control my behavioral awareness." "Why do you want to control me? Am I not pretty enough? Or am I not in good shape? Once you have a good time with me, you will find that I have even more powerful abilities." Xu Meng stood up and approached Zhongliang. "Have you never seen a man?" Zhongliang yelled, then analyzed rationally, "With your looks and conditions, it's impossible for you to lack men around you. How could you be so impatient to see a man who installs air conditioners like a hungry tiger pouncing on its food? Because you are young and handsome. There are plenty of young and handsome men. I'm not so handsome that you can't find one on the street. Stop playing tricks on me. What's your purpose in seducing me? You are quite sensible. I do have a crush on you, but I am also entrusted by someone. You can't beat him, so listen to my arrangements as soon as possible. It will definitely be good for you. I haven't offended any big shot. You'd better explain it to me." Zhongliang stared at Xu Meng in confusion, but he couldn't help but have a strong reaction to her body. "Don't ask so many questions. Just leave Shen Caiyue. I originally wanted to seduce you, break up you and Shen Caiyue, and then dump you. Now I want to experience what it feels like to be a man with excessive dopamine secretion." Xu Meng took a sip of wine and put the glass on the bar. She approached Zhongliang and put her hands on his shoulders, showing her charm. Since Shen Caiyue was mentioned, Zhongliang naturally thought of her ex-husband. "Is it Han Bing who wants me to stay away from Shen Caiyue? Do you know Han Bing?" Xu Meng was a little surprised. She didn't expect that an air conditioner installer would know Han Bing. "I had dinner with him at Shen Caiyue's house. I thought he was very polite and thought he was a good person. If he were a good guy, there would be no bad people in this world. Anyone who can climb to such a high position must be a ruthless, hypocritical hypocrite. If he were a good guy, how could he stand out from a group of bad guys? He must be more ruthless and evil than those bad guys. Xu Meng has met too many prominent people and has seen the true faces of many people. Zhongliang suddenly asked nervously, "Will Han Bing hurt Shen Caiyue? It seems that you really have feelings for that woman and you are still worried about her at this time. Let me tell you the truth. Han Bing is ruthless to everyone, but he cares about his ex-wife very much and can't let her go. He will definitely not hurt Shen Caiyue, but he will not be soft on you. If you take the initiative to leave Shen Caiyue now, it is not too late. If you continue to take risks, I am afraid you will not have the chance to regret it tomorrow." Zhongliang hesitated for a moment, then said nonchalantly, "As long as he doesn't hurt Shen Caiyue, let him come at me with whatever means he wants." Then he turned around and left. Xu Meng stepped forward and grabbed Zhongliang, warning him seriously, "I'm not trying to scare you. If you dare to go to Shen Caiyue's house tonight, something bad will happen. I'll report it to the police when I get home, and if anything goes wrong, it'll be his fault." Zhongliang had no better idea. As an ordinary citizen, he could only think of this method. "You are too naive. A big shot like him, is he afraid that you will call the police? Take my advice, don't provoke him. I'm giving you a chance now, so just quit while you're ahead. I wanted to deceive you originally, but now I am dating you seriously, so I will compensate you. You have seen my conditions, and I can satisfy you with both romantic pleasure and wealth. Forget it. I still want to live 2 more years in good health." Zhongliang had no intention of accepting Xu Meng's kindness. Just as he was about to walk out, Xu Meng pushed him hard. She asked angrily, "What do you mean, am I not as good as Shen Caiyue? Even if she is good, she is over 40 years old. Is she really that good? As soon as you heard that I secreted a lot of dopamine, you couldn't wait to use me like a donkey. After she knew my situation, she supervised me every day and forced me to conserve my energy and take care of my body. How can you compare with her?" Xu Meng was stunned by the question and couldn't help muttering to herself, "Is this her way of conquering men?" Then she suddenly retorted loudly, "That would require meeting a man like you. When I was young, I also gave my all, but why haven't I met a man who knows how to cherish me?" "That's your business, why are you asking me?" Zhongliang was too lazy to discuss those messy things with her and continued to walk out. Xu Meng chased him all the way to the door, pulled him hard, and warned him one last time, "Han Bing has been sending people to monitor Shen Caiyue's house downstairs. If you dare to go to her house tonight, the consequences will be very serious." Zhongliang looked at Xu Meng's nervous expression. He knew that he was an ordinary citizen. What he could see and touch was only a small part of society, and that part was packaged and designed. Once he is enveloped by true darkness, he may not be able to fight back at all. "Let me think about it." Zhongliang's attitude was no longer so tough, and he also felt Xu Meng's concern for him. "I was somewhat grateful to her, and with the effect of a large amount of dopamine, I couldn't help swallowing, and the desire in my eyes was burning like fire." Xu Meng also noticed the change in Zhongliang's attitude and his boiling state, and couldn't help but look him up and down. "Pull him." He dragged her arm into their house and said, "Look at how you've been holding it in. It's hard work. It makes me feel bad. Come in quickly. Let me help you, okay?" Although Zhongliang didn't want to go into their house with her, his reason and desire were now equal, and no one was willing to compromise. He took a deep breath and adjusted his breathing, trying to calm himself down. But without Shen Caiyue's help, it was difficult for him to fight against the large amount of dopamine, and he was dragged into their house step by Xu Meng. Xu Meng looked at Zhongliang's exaggerated expression. As a seasoned lover, she had experienced all kinds of situations with men. Her expectations at this moment were also maxed out. "I was so excited, my blood was boiling. It was like the first time I went through an underwater tunnel." Just when she thought everything was basically settled and was about to reach out to close the door, Zhongliang suddenly yelled, rushed out of the door, and ran away without looking back. Xu Meng was frightened and rushed to the door, looking at Zhongliang's back as he fled in a panic. Thousands of words piled up in his chest, and in the end he could only helplessly mutter, "Fuck, I really can't let him do it." Then he went back into their house angrily and slammed the door shut. Chapter 25, Not Afraid of Threats. After Xu Meng returned to their house, she called Han Bing, and Han Bing asked her if she had finished the task. She did not answer directly. She wanted to plead for Zhongliang, but she felt it was not sincere enough when she said on the phone. So he asked where Han Bing was, intending to talk to him in person. Zhongliang came to the clinic again, and this time Shen Caiyue happened to have nothing to do. He sat directly in front of Shen Caiyue and sighed. When he saw this woman, he finally relaxed. Shen Caiyue smiled and teased, "Young man, what's wrong with you? Are you being bullied again?" Then she couldn't help but reach out and touch Zhongliang's face, which surprised her colleagues. When a woman is in love, some ambiguous actions will naturally appear, and sometimes she can't detect it. Fortunately, Shen Caiyue reacted in time and realized that this was not her home. Quickly pretend to examine Zhongliang. "I went to see that female client again today." Shen Caiyue was slightly displeased. "Why did you go to see her?" "She called the company to complain about me, and my boss asked me to come to apologize. She told me clearly that it was your ex-husband who instructed her to set me up to prevent me from getting close to you. She also threatened me that if I dared to go to your house tonight, the consequences would be serious." Shen Caiyue was not particularly surprised. She had doubts about Hanbing last night. She knew Hanbing had always wanted to remarry, but she didn't expect that he would interfere with who she was with. She also knew that Hanbing was not just talking and leaving, that man had many means and strategies. Shen Caiyue looked at Zhongliang's nervous expression and asked distressedly, "Are you scared?" "As long as he doesn't hurt you, I'm not afraid of him." "Can he really cover up everything?" Shen Caiyue didn't want to admit it, but nodded helplessly. He can deal with ordinary people like you who have no background, he can do it." Then he stood up, took Zhongliang to the corner where patients were examined, and pulled the curtain behind him. She threw herself into Zhongliang's arms and apologized. "I'm sorry, I didn't expect him to do such a thing. I don't care what means he has. As long as he doesn't hurt you, there's nothing to be afraid of. I want to be with you, and no one's threats will work." Shen Caiyue looked at Zhongliang's firm attitude, excitedly took off her mask, and took the initiative to give him a passionate kiss. After the two separated, Zhongliang said shyly, "Dr. Shen, you are so proactive all of a sudden, I am a little uncomfortable with it." Shen Caiyue patted Zhongliang's chest gently with a shy look on her face. Then she gently stroked his face, unable to let go of this little boyfriend. "Don't worry. I won't let him hurt you." Shen Caiyue took out her cell phone and called Hanbing. Hanbing was both excited and nervous when he saw the incoming call on his cell phone. After so many years, this was the first time Shen Caiyue contacted him on her own initiative. But he guessed that it was because of Zhongliang, and his plan was probably exposed. Hanbing answered the call with a smile. "Caiyue, what do you want to talk to me about? If you dare to hurt Zhongliang, I will never forgive you in my life. What rumors have you heard? I have no ill will towards that young man. You saw me being very friendly to him when we had dinner at your house the other day. It's impossible between us, but because of my daughter, I am willing to accept you as a friend. I hope you don't break this harmonious relationship, okay?" Of course. I cherish our relationship of caring for each other but not disturbing each other. I think there may be some misunderstanding here. Is that young man next to you? I want to explain to him." Shen Caiyue glanced at Zhongliang, and while she was still hesitating, Zhongliang reached out to take the phone. He and Shen Caiyue were very close and could hear their conversation. Zhongliang greeted politely, "Hello, Mr. Han." "Hello, there may be some misunderstanding between us. Would it be convenient for you to talk in person?" "Of course it's convenient. Where shall we meet?" "I'm in the office now. If it's inconvenient for you to come, I can also come to you. I'll go find you." After a few brief conversations, Zhongliang hung up the phone and returned it to Shen Caiyue. "Are you really going to meet him?" Shen Caiyue hugged Zhongliang tightly, expressing her concern. Zhongliang looked at her nervous expression and couldn't help but sigh. "I'm willing to go through fire and water for you, let alone meet your ex-husband. How about I go with you? I'm worried about you going to see him alone. Don't provoke him. I will definitely go home safely tonight to accompany you, hug you and kiss you. That's all you think about?" Shen Caiyue glared at Zhongliang, put on a mask, pulled open the curtain, and reluctantly saw him out of the clinic. Hanbing threw his phone aside and leaned back in his chair with a worried look on his face. Shen Caiyue's words still carry a lot of weight to him. If she really never talks to him again in this life, his daughter will probably stand on her side. "Even if I am prosperous now, the extravagance and debauchery are just passing clouds. When I grow old, I will always be most concerned about them, mother and daughter." He didn't dare to break Shen Caiyue's heart, he knew that woman didn't seek fame and money. If she was determined to draw a line between them, they would really become strangers. Just when Han Bing was at a loss, there were several knocks on the door, and the secretary brought Xu Meng into the office. Xu Meng came to the desk and sat down, but didn't have time to speak. Han Bing was the first to blame. Not only did you fail to get the job done, you also betrayed me. Xu Meng quickly explained, he was the one who guessed it was yours. I didn't expect that you knew him and even had dinner together at his ex-wife's house. Han Bing glared at Xu Meng, sighed, and didn't want to pursue the matter any further. Unless Zhongliang takes the initiative to leave Shen Caiyue, as long as she arranges someone to hurt him, Shen Caiyue will most likely guess who is behind it. Xu Meng carefully. Comfort, after several tests, I think that young man is sincere to your ex-wife. You don't have to worry that he will cheat Shen Caiyue's feelings and property. Han Bing asked seriously, are you speaking for that young man? I think you have no shortage of women around you, so why bother with your ex-wife? I'm not saying goodbye to her, I just can't let her go. She's not just a woman, she's my wife and the mother of my children. This feeling will never change even if I divorce her. Xu Meng noticed that Han Bing was a little agitated and did not dare to plead for Zhongliang anymore. But remembering that interesting incident, he told Han Bing that Zhongliang had suffered a head injury, which caused his brain to secrete excessive dopamine. After listening to this, Han Bing asked doubtfully, what kind of disease is that? What are the symptoms of excessive secretion of dopamine? Xu Meng smiled and replied, it can stimulate the central nervous system, thereby enhancing sexual desire. When you see or come into contact with the opposite sex, you will be particularly excited and impulsive. You will want it endlessly until your body is drained, or even die from exhaustion. Han Bing thought of Shen Caiyue and his daughter being with this kind of person in the future. He immediately wanted to kill her, and he would never allow this kind of person to get close to Shen Caiyue and his daughter. But then he changed his mind and said jokingly, who told you that? Is there such a disease? I've been in contact with him and he looks normal. He said it himself, and I could see it when I seduced him. His body's reaction was really strong and exaggerated. But his willpower was very strong. I don't know who gave him the determination and strength to resist his instincts and desires. He was able to withstand temptation again and again. Han Bing still didn't quite believe this, and said casually, wait until he comes and give it a try and you'll know. Xu Meng asked in surprise, what? Is he coming? Han Bing nodded and looked out the window thoughtfully. Chapter 27 Temporary Calm. After watching the secretary take Zhongliang out of the office, Han Bing sat back behind his desk and began to think about what to do next. Xu Meng walked to the desk and asked expectantly, how are you going to deal with Zhongliang? Han Bing ignored her and took out his cell phone to call Shen Caiyue. Is Zhongliang with you? After Shen Caiyue answered the call, she first asked about Zhongliang's situation. We had a nice conversation and he has left. Han Bing answered calmly, then cleared his throat and asked awkwardly, I heard that you live together, but sleep in separate rooms, right? What is your relationship with him? This is a private matter between him and me, I don't need to explain it to you. You two sound alike. Han Bing complained and asked directly, when are you going to marry him? Do you have anything else to do? Shen Caiyue didn't want to answer this question and was about to hang up the phone. Han Bing could tell that Shen Caiyue was angry, but he had no temper at all towards this woman. From the time they met to the time they got married and divorced, they never had a fierce quarrel. Shen Caiyue was a very gentle and considerate woman. There was nothing wrong with her appearance, figure, and character. If Han Bing had not become rich overnight and been blinded by power and money, he would never have divorced her. But it's too late to regret now. Shen Caiyue was devoted to him back then, but unfortunately he didn't know how to cherish her. Han Bing quickly talked calmly, I don't want to interfere in your affairs. I just care about you. I'm just asking like an ordinary friend. Shen Caiyue usually talks about things and doesn't get emotional, so she calmed down and replied, I haven't considered that step yet. Han Bing inquired carefully again, I heard that you two still sleep in separate rooms, right? Shen Caiyue nodded. I just know that you are not the kind of person who is easy to deal with. When we first met. Nothing, I'm hanging up. Shen Caiyue hung up the phone. Han Bing frowned helplessly and then smiled. Shen Caiyue was a little bit irritable with him, which made him feel very happy. Thinking about the good times they had in the past, a trace of sweetness came from his heart. Xu Meng was sitting at her desk, staring at Han Bing's sweet expression, and asked with a smile, "Boss Han, what are you thinking about?" "It's none of your business, just go do your thing." Han Bing waved his hand and sent Xu Meng away. "It's still better to be the original wife. Even if you're divorced, your status won't change." Xu Meng teased helplessly, and then asked, "What should we do about Zhongliang's matter?" "Let's put it aside for now. Let me think about it. I have to find a way to make him make his own mistakes, so Shen Caiyue can't blame me." Han Bing muttered to himself. He still wanted to stop Zhongliang from being with Shen Caiyue, but he didn't want to offend Shen Caiyue. "Then I'll go first. If you need anything, you can arrange it." Han Bing nodded with a serious expression and watched Xu Meng leave the office. Because he went to meet Han Bing in the afternoon, Zhongliang got off work a little late. When he returned, Shen Caiyue had already prepared food and was waiting for him. When the two were having dinner, Shen Caiyue asked what Zhongliang and Han Bing talked about. Zhongliang told the truth, but of course he didn't mention the two beauties around him seducing him. After listening to this, Shen Caiyue sighed helplessly. Han Bing is a very cunning person. He usually won't give up on something he has decided to do, and will always do whatever it takes to get it done. I hope he will find his conscience this time and not interfere in our affairs. Since we have decided to be together, there is no need to think too much. He is too controlling. I think he regretted divorcing you." Shen Caiyue nodded. "He did mention remarrying several times in the past few years, but I rejected it every time. A prodigal son who returns is worth more than gold. Why don't you give him a chance?" Shen Caiyue glared at Zhongliang, and Zhongliang added, "I mean, before we got together, weren't you single? Why didn't you want to accept him again?" Shen Caiyue did not answer and lowered her head to continue eating. Zhongliang quickly apologized. "Did I say something wrong? I'm sorry. It's nothing. I don't blame you. I just don't know how to answer. I don't hate him, and I don't have any feelings for him anymore, so I'm just waiting. Waiting for someone who makes you feel something, right?" Shen Caiyue still didn't answer, but the corners of her mouth couldn't help but rise. She had finally waited. After dinner, the two of them snuggled on the sofa again. It didn't matter what was on TV. They had no time or energy to look at the TV screen. Shen Caiyue separated from Zhongliang, took a deep breath and negotiated with him. "Talk to me. Don't keep kissing me. You're tired." Shen Caiyue shook her head shyly and casually said, "Han Bing asked us today when we will get married. Is he still planning to come with the gift?" Zhongliang joked with a smile, then looked at Shen Caiyue's expectant eyes. "I asked tentatively, you want to discuss this issue with me, right?" Shen Caiyue asked back, "Have you ever thought about this question?" "Of course, I made up my mind the first time I saw you. I will definitely spend the rest of my life with you, as long as you are willing. After I get the divorce certificate in the morning, we will go to register for the marriage certificate in the afternoon." Shen Caiyue couldn't help laughing. "That staff member issued you a divorce certificate in the morning and a marriage certificate in the afternoon. Did he think he was hallucinating?" "You think too much. These two businesses don't seem to be in the same window. What if he works at the divorce counter in the morning and switches to the marriage counter in the afternoon?" Zhongliang was stunned for a few seconds, and gently pinched Shen Caiyue's graceful, white and smooth chin. Jokingly said, "Do you think you are very humorous?" Shen Caiyue lay in Zhongliang's arms and smiled happily, revealing 2 rows of white and neat teeth. Then she shyly stuck out her tongue, and the pink and wet tip of her tongue poked out. Zhongliang didn't want to continue talking. "I haven't said anything yet." Shen Caiyue didn't have a chance to finish her words. She wrapped her arms around Zhongliang's neck and couldn't help but hug him tightly. It was very late, and Zhongliang asked curiously, "Why don't you hurry back to your room to sleep tonight?" Shen Caiyue asked back, "What do you think?" Zhongliang stroked her rosy and hot cheeks and guessed excitedly, "Do you want to have sex tonight?" Shen Caiyue did not answer. She covered her face with one hand, and the corners of her mouth could not help but rise. Her shy look revealed everything. "If you want it, just take it. There's no hard and fast rule for this kind of thing. You don't have to wait until a certain day. Today is a good day. I just want you to hold me all night long." Shen Caiyue reveals the tenderness and sweetness of a young woman. "Okay. I'll carry you back to sleep now." Zhongliang carried her off the sofa and walked towards Shen Caiyue's room. After putting Shen Caiyue on the bed, she negotiated with some embarrassment. I still want to wait until the day you get your divorce certificate before having sex. Okay. I'll listen to you. Zhongliang agreed readily. Shen Caiyue was a little disappointed. Why are you so impatient when facing other women? It takes a lot of effort to restrain yourself. But when facing me, you are so calm. Is it because I am not attractive to you? When I'm with other members of the opposite sex, I just want to vent under the influence of dopamine. When I'm with you, I'm more attracted by your words, actions, and smiles, which distracts me from my desire for that kind of thing. After explaining a few words, Zhongliang leaned close to Shen Caiyue's ear and said, "Of course I want you too. I really, really, really want you." Shen Caiyue took a deep breath and felt like she was about to melt. She tried to sit up and wanted to take a shower but was too lazy to move. After calming down for a moment, he asked, "When will you get the divorce certificate?" Zhongliang thought for a moment and replied, "It will be ready in a few days. You can pick it up in 2 weeks. Then wait 2 weeks. You can rest for a few more days." Shen Caiyue gave him a kiss and asked excitedly, "How about that? I'll listen to you." Zhongliang agreed readily. "You go back and rest. I'm going to change and go to bed." Shen Caiyue urged him to leave. "Do we still have to be so formal now? I'm afraid you can't control yourself. I feel like you want more." Zhongliang walked out muttering quietly.